Our adventure begins in the rage-filled eyes of the one and only Doomslayer, a superhuman warrior given godlike powers by Maker Technology, who's been deployed to the Argentian village of Khalim, currently under attack by a large contingent of demonic forces. The invasion is being personally overseen by a high-ranking demon hellpriest named Belias and a mysterious dark figure only referred to as the Witch, an otherworldly deity who seems to have formed an uneasy partnership with the demons in her search for something she calls the Heart of Argent. Elsewhere, King Novik, the ruler of the Argentian people, and his daughter Commander Thera are coordinating with ground troops and the Slayer to organize evacuations and counterattacks. And that's the scoop. The Slayer's mission is simple: kill all demons and be back before bedtime. To start off with, the Slayer is given only one gun, his faithful combat shotgun, which is said to have been found next to his battered and bloody body when he was first discovered by the Argentians after having traveled through a magic portal. The codex description of the weapon explains that the Slayer's not an Argentian. He was apparently once an ordinary human with extraordinary speed and strength. In addition to the shotgun, the Slayer also possesses a hefty circular shield that he can use to block attacks and projectiles. Moving forward, it doesn't take long to find the first enemies of the game, the pathetic zombies of hell, shambling remnants of long-dead species that fell to the dark influence of evil, all fused into one grotesque form and made to wander the battlefield as mindless fodder to their demonic masters. They're not hard to kill and don't pack much of a punch, and it's here we learn the Slayer can also perform a charge attack where he uses his shield to bash his enemies. Navigating the village outskirts, the Slayer soon comes upon a much larger group of enemies comprised of demonic soldiers, the vile infantrymen of hell, who invade countless worlds in massive wicked throngs of dreadful savagery. They aren't too tough either, however, and it's here we learn that if the Slayer falls from a great enough height, he'll create a shockwave when he hits the ground that sends nearby enemies flying. It's not like a slam move or anything either. He doesn't appear to actually intentionally do it, he's just that heavy. Around the corner, the Slayer soon sees an unfortunate sight: the eviscerated bodies of Argentian citizens who couldn't make it out of the village in time, and next to their corpses he finds the remains of their Knight Sentinel protectors who were overwhelmed by the demonic invasion just the same as the civilians. Either that or these dudes lied on their job resumes, since the Knight Sentinels are the elite warrior caste of the people of Argentia, who the Slayer works alongside of in his mission to destroy the forces of hell. Charging through a wooden barrier, the Slayer meets a new species of demon, the imposing Imp Stalker, a title which is not to say that it is a stalker that stalks imps, but that it is a stalker that is an imp, if that makes sense. And he's a big boy, a predatory hunter of hell that unleashes waves of dark magic fire on his foes. The Slayer punches it to smithereens, and this is where the game demonstrates that when the Slayer melees an enemy, they will drop ammo reserves for him, a nice little design element that encourages an aggressive playstyle, encouraging you to always stay in your enemy's face. After he takes care of a few more, a small group of surviving Knight Sentinels open a door for him and stay behind to watch his back as he keeps moving into the village. The Slayer can hear the echoing screams of the Argentian people in the distance, and he's able to see firsthand some of the damage the demons are causing to the overmatched townsfolk. Now this is some pretty good scale. A lot of games would just have the village be completely empty and, only show dead bodies everywhere, so I really respect that they actually tried to show some survivors here, which goes a long way to make the world feel lived in. But I just have one issue. Do you notice anything strange about this guy? Yeah, he's huge. Actually, everyone here looks to be a good head taller than the Doomslayer. Some of them are bending over and they're still eye level with him, which is strange because the Slayer is supposed to be enormous. I think his official height is somewhere above 6'8", so unless I'm missing something and the people of Argenta are all NBA players, I think they might have forgotten to scale these models down a bit. Regardless, after he makes his way through a burning building, the Slayer hears Commander Thera over the radio say she's got a shiny new toy for the Slayer to play with. Opening the airdrop container, the Slayer is given the Mighty Power Gauntlet, an upgrade that allows him to punch things more harder and kill demons more deader. Continuing onwards through the incinerated remains of the once bustling mining colony, the Slayer crashes down into another arena where amongst the frenzy he sees another new demon variant. The non-stalkers standard imps, obnoxious little gnats who are much quicker and weaker than their corn-fed cousins, and serve as the most common of the low-born demons. After he cleans up the mess, the Slayer hears a Sentinel soldier over his radio say that the main gate of the town is locked, so Commander Thera tells them to route a path for the Slayer so he can find the key. It's on this path that we can see the extent of a demonic invasion doesn't only involve an endless stampede of demons. The very ground of the planet is being consumed by Hell's essence. Moving into a collapsed building, the game demonstrates the Slayer's ability to deflect attacks, a very fun gameplay element that more than makes up for his lack of a dodge ability. Making mincemeat of a few more demons who dare get in his way, the Slayer meets a very interesting new demon variant, the aptly named Pinky and its demonic archer rider, who fires arrows at the Slayer while his steed attempts to bite and slash at him. After dispatching Tweedledee and Tweedledum, the Slayer hops into a derelict church and finds what he's been looking for, a group of Argentian cultists engaged in a ritual that's sustaining portals to hell for more demons to come through. After blasting each of them to bits, the Slayer takes a key off a dead guy rocking a medieval mustache and heads outside to see that a group of sentinels are waiting by the gate now. Using the key and stepping out of the village, Commander Thera explains over the radio that once the Slayer kills enough demons, the planet's connection to hell will be severed and the hell portals will collapse. And here we go. The ensuing area is now fully open and non-linear. The player is let loose into the world with some basic objectives to take care of, secrets to hunt down, and loads of demons to kill. So now, instead of painstakingly summarizing every single thing the Slayer does like I did with the linear segment, I'd like to take this opportunity to discuss a few more of the Slayer's gameplay intricacies, starting with his shield. Firstly, his shield isn't indestructible. If he absorbs too much damage with it, it'll actually break, and it'll need a good few seconds to repair itself, so you can't just hide behind it during each encounter. Second, one issue I have is that when the Slayer actually blocks an attack like normal, a damage indicator will appear to show where the attack came from, which is helpful, but the problem is that the indicator is red. Red is kind of the universal video game color for taking damage, but when the Slayer blocks an attack with the shield, he's blocking it, so he doesn't take any damage, so I kind of found that a little confusing, to be honest. Third, remember how I said earlier he can deflect attacks with it? Well, he'll only be able to deflect it if the attack is a certain color. By default, it's green, but because I've been playing Doom since 2016 and I've always associated green with armor pickups, I decided that it'd be better to switch the deflectable color to purple. This game has loads of customization, and even though I can't find one for the shield block indicator, you can tweak basically any other setting you want, even down to some gameplay ones. And at this early stage, we can easily tell that it's not going to be one of those games that wants to be challenging just for the sake of being challenging. It really just wants you to have fun, and this is made more and more evident in each ensuing battle. To be honest, I don't think it would be correct to describe this game as a power fantasy. It feels like that word is used to describe every game these days. I think Doom the Dark Ages is a simulation of what it must feel like to be a red supergiant star collapsing under its own gravity. Every stomping step the Slayer takes reverberates through your eardrums. Every punch to a demon rips away chunks of their flesh and bone, and even his shield is much more of a weapon than a defensive tool. This is the most aggressive I've felt in the shoes of a video game character since Subject 106. Nobody does it better than the Doom Slayer, and we're only just getting started. Eventually, however, after he disables a few hell portals, the Slayer happens upon another Sentinel airdrop container, and within it he finds the spectacular Shredder, a mechanical marvel of Sentinel engineering that rapidly fires metal bolts with kinetic energy generated by a crystal core mined from the volcanic depths of Mount Keldrath. It's your workhorse automatic gun, low DPS, high rate of fire, no hassle. After testing his new Shredder on some demons, the Slayer steps over to an overlook above the sea and admires the view. I want to take a moment here to say once again I'm really impressed with this level's scale. The technical stuff, texture work, the lighting, animations, it's all very well done too, but what I like especially are the little details way off in the distance. You can see windmills along the coastline miles away, dragons flying in the clouds, and an enormous demonic rune out on the horizon. This world is lively, and I can't wait to see more of it, and once the Slayer takes care of all the hell portals, a blood-curdling roar is heard, and King Novik says that the demons have summoned a titan. But before he makes his exit from the area, the Slayer climbs up a wall and finds a codex entry on himself of all things. The entry explains that the Slayer is viewed as an outsider in Argentian society, and the Maker allies of the Argenta saw fit to grant him celestial might with their otherworldly technology, as a means to exert their divine will on the universe. The reading concludes, however, by implying the Slayer doesn't really like the way the Makers are treating him, but as long as it means he gets to kill more demons, he's willing to work with them. Now, I didn't really properly introduce the Slayer when I first started the video, and this is why. We'll be getting a lot more information about him as the story goes on. After reading about himself, the Slayer makes his way over to a gate the Night Sentinels have opened for him and enters a small church where he sees a few Argentian citizens praying to a statue of an alien creature. The Slayer steps outside and bears witness to a demonic titan being distracted by a sentinel dragon, which serves as an incredible set piece for a small skirmish on the beach below. Titans are colossal minions of hell that actually weren't always demons. It's said that eons ago they were a peaceful race of a verdant world, but on one fateful day they fell to the corruptive influence of hell and were twisted by its dark priests to become its most powerful bringers of chaos. As the Slayer battles his way closer to the Titan, he soon finds a turret that he can use to stop the demonic onslaught and defend against it. Eventually, he even actually manages to take it down with the turret entirely on his own. Geez, why aren't the Sentinels funding more of these things? Forget Atlans and tanks, 2 or 3 of these bad boys around the village could have had this whole thing over in half an hour. Regardless, after the Titan is felled, the Slayer is abducted back into the Maker's ship, and a brief cutscene plays where Novik and Thera discuss the circumstances of his usage by the Makers. Yes, this game has cutscenes, an abundance of them in fact, and while they're very interesting, they can be a little on the longer side, so I'm gonna have to just talk over a fair few of them so this video doesn't take me an entire year to make. Meanwhile, in Hell, the current elected official of the Damned, Prince Azrak, is having a small meeting with his cabinet to discuss the recent developments that have transpired with the Slayer. His Hell Priest Vice President Belias is cautioning him against collaborating too closely with the Witch, blaming the recent failed invasion on her, and Prince Azrak expresses frustration at his subordinates' inability to kill one dude. Belias leaves to go pick up his dry cleaning, and the Witch comments on how the Slayer is doing pretty well in the demon polls. If he keeps it up, he's got a shot at the big chair and Azrak will be out of a job. That's not completely a joke either. In the Doom universe, hell isn't really like an abstract concept of a possible afterlife. It's a physical dimension with its own sort of ecosystem. There's even a demon high council where the most powerful demons get together and discuss evil over tea and biscuits. The implication I'm getting appears to be that the most feared and powerful being in existence is the one the demons will seek to rule hell. And since the Slayer is a pretty powerful dude, they're actually considering him to be their new master over Azrak. In a rare display of a video game villain being smart, Prince Azrak says that the Slayer has too much plot armor right now and they need to take out some major characters before they should try and take any real kind of shot at him. And that is the end of the first level. We pick back up sometime later on the Sentinel planet of Hebeth and get a look inside at the Maker's ship the Slayer is being kept in. It's here we meet the big fatty Maker, a high-ranking Maker commander who oversees the strategic deployment of the Slayer into Argentian combat zones. One of his subordinates is explaining to him that the city of Hebeth has an important Sentinel apparatus in it that prevents Hell from opening a portal into the world. The fatty Maker reasonably concludes that it must be on the fritz since the whole place is quite clearly infested with demons, to which the subordinate explains that the demons here are the result of heretical Sentinel cultists within the city creating their own portals to hell, and the fatty Maker starts picking up what he's putting down about how this is clearly a job for the Slayer again. The scene cuts to the Slayer's prison chamber where a couple of magic alien angel robots are nervously discussing how he appears to be getting better at resisting against their Tether's influence. Meanwhile, as these two are chit-chatting, the Slayer is tortured by murky visions of some sort of rune engraved in blackened stone, one that looks very similar to the ones on his shield, but before we can really make out what exactly it's supposed to mean, he's sent down to the planet's surface and told to get to work. And wow, I thought the last level scale was cool. This place easily puts it to shame. Titans swinging their massive demonic maces at their puny foes, enormous storm clouds ominously approaching from the east, demonic and sentinel ships dogfighting in the skies, a gigantic Marvel movie bullshit sky laser in the distance, and colossal mountains and buildings stretching out as far as the eye can see. You can even spot the Maker's ship floating above it all in the distance too. There is so much packed into this environment. The only thing is that, you remember those Sentinel soldiers in the cutscene? They're actually here in the level too, which is cool, but they just stand here. Are you guys gonna help? This is your planet. Anyway, the Slayer checks out the airdrop that the Sentinels deployed for him and is bestowed the mighty Shield Saw, a special upgrade to his shield that allows him to throw it at his demonic targets and hold them in place as it tears into their flesh. He can also throw it at superheated metal to cause it to explode, meaning that if a demon is holding a shield, for example, and he shoots it with a weapon to heat it up, he can then throw his shield at it and it'll make a big boom. Gnarly. Hopping over some boxes, the Slayer finds some Sentinels and Argentians cowering in a corner and finds floating next to them a codex entry for the city of Hebeth. The codex entry explains that the industrial outpost of Hebeth was chosen at the outset of the war with Hell as a suitable place to install a trans-dimensional barrier that would protect Argentian worlds. If the demons managed to take it out, they would be able to create enormous portals anywhere they want to invade Argentian worlds at their leisure. After the Slayer finishes intimidating some random Argentian scientist lady, he keeps moving through the city and eventually meets a new demon species, the Hell Knight. Easily one of the most fun enemies in the entire game. Hell Knights are some of the most brutal and powerful members of the demon hierarchy, ranking much higher above their more common brethren, and with good reason. These guys don't have any special projectiles or shields or weapons, they just run towards the Slayer and try to bash him to pieces. They're an absolute blast, so simple, and I think now is a good time to discuss this game's gore, since they're a great example of how gore can actually be used effectively. Even if I was playing with the HUD turned on, demons in Doom games have no health bars. Instead, the method you have to use to determine their health is by simply looking at the state their body is in. As the Slayer fights a demon, you'll notice that he gradually tears away chunks of their flesh, and the rage-fueled demon will continue to pursue him until there's nothing left to be torn away. The more messed up the demon looks, the less health it has, so instead of it being disgusting Tarantino violence fetish shit, it actually serves a purpose during gameplay. Once the Slayer takes care of the Hell Knights, he steps into another building, and something I noticed here is that if you creepily stand next to the Argentian citizens, you can hear them anxiously whispering about the Slayer.
Stay out of his way. He isn't human.
Which is cool, but again, I feel like I should be the one that's intimidated. Look at the size of these dudes. What do you all eat out here? In the next room, the game introduces its currency system scattered throughout the city of Hebeth, and each ensuing level will be pieces of gold that the Slayer can use to purchase upgrades for his gear at Sentinel shrines. After meeting another imp variant, the Stone Imp, which can only be killed reliably with a deflection or a shield charge, the Slayer happens upon the first group of Sentinel cultists and puts them all down before grabbing a keycard and heading into the next room, where he meets a couple more new enemy variants. The first is the Plasma Shield Demonic Soldier, a variant immune to the superheated shield blasts of their metal shield using brethren, and the Nightmare Imp Stalker, the regular Imp Stalker's elusive shadowy counterpart. Once he takes care of them, he uses the blue keycard to gain access to the Research and Development division of the building, in which he meets an imposing new demonic species, the horribly obese Mancubus. Mankeys are used within the armies of Hell as mobile artillery. Dreadful, burdensome weaponry is grafted into their bodies, which they happily use to bring carnage to their victims, who they consume in primal bloodlust to gain even more vile mass and strength, perpetuating the disgusting life cycle of what is undoubtedly one of Hell's most grotesque life forms, if you can rightly call the state they are in life to begin with. They are also very fun to fight, big and slow, but if you get close to them, they have a special get away from me type move where they slam their arms into the ground and blast fire from their cannons. But the Slayer is able to deflect the ground slam attack with his shield, so if your reflexes are good enough, you can be rewarded again for getting in close and being aggressive instead of being punished. Mankeys are fun chaps, and after his first bout with them, the Slayer discovers the Accelerator Plasma Rifle, a remarkable fusion of Sentinel and Maker engineering that serves as the first weapon in the Argentian arsenal to utilize a specialized hybrid electrothermal core. If I'm understanding this codex entry correctly, it creates its own bullets through the formation of projectiles with a superheated plasma center surrounded by a frozen hardened shell, and each projectile creates a small explosion on impact. It's especially effective against enemies with armor or shields, even more so than the Shredder, but it doesn't have nearly as good range, so it's much better when it's used up close. Testing the accelerator on some hopelessly overmatched demons, the Slayer takes a moment to observe his surroundings. This is a pretty cool environment. There's holograms of Sentinel Atlan's, diagrams of demonic titans, and one cool detail I like especially are the signs of Maker influence throughout the facility's architecture. You can see their iconography in some of the doors and walls. Many of the Argenta actually regard the Makers as gods of sorts, so we'll be seeing a lot more of this as the game goes on. After killing another group of cultists, the Slayer makes his way outside of the building and sees outside a Sentinel Atlan struggling against a Titan. The corruption of hell is once again quickly spreading. Writhing tendrils and masses of nightmarish meat are engulfing every surface, and when the Slayer tries to cross over a bridge, the Sentinel and Atlan scuffle gets in his way and takes the bridge out, forcing him to take a detour through some more feisty demons. What's really cool is that the Atlan and the Titan will keep squabbling in the background as the Slayer battles his enemies. The fight is fully animated, and the Titan will even walk away once he finishes the Atlan off for good. Dropping down into a lower level of the city, Commander Thera plots a course for the Slayer to a nearby teleporter relay, and on the way over, the Slayer comes upon whatever this thing is that allows him to throw his shield into it and then jump over large gaps using his arm magnet. I have no idea what this thing is, by the way. It's some weird big green dripping body embedded in the hell growths. I feel like it might have some kind of lore to it, and this won't be the only time it shows up, but I don't know. Regardless, the Slayer eventually arrives at the teleporter and finds himself back outside again, where after a particularly crowded battle, the game introduces the mechanic of leader enemies. Elite demons equipped with unique gear who upon being killed will grant the Slayer some kind of stat boost to either his health, ammo, or armor. And after defeating the Pinky Pimp, the Sentinels open a massive door for the Slayer, and inside he sees they've been getting ready a little present for him. Graciously accepting the towering Sentinel Atlan, the Slayer hops into the driver's seat and establishes the pilot neural link. And actually, I just rewatched Pacific Rim like a few weeks ago, and I wanted to point something out here. Just bear with me on this. Okay, so you know how in Pacific Rim, or basically any like giant war robot movie or game, there always has to be some kind of brain link thing for the pilot and robot, right? Which design-wise is completely unnecessary, but I'll get to that in a second. Regardless, in Pacific Rim, for example, whenever they do the neural link thing, they always go like because like the robots in the movie are designed to basically be giant metal organic bodies. Like if the monster hits the robot on its left leg, the pilot will feel pain on his left leg. But the mental load of a person's brain processing the millions of synthetic nerves in the robot feeling pain is always too much for them, which is why they get like future cancer and stuff. So I was thinking, if you really want to do the neural link thing for some reason, instead of just, you know, making the robot pilotable normally without it, why not just make the connection one way? If the pilot thinks move robot right arm up, just design the robot so that it accepts the mental command from his brain and doesn't send any back. The pilot doesn't need to feel the robot lift its arm, he can just see it. Like, is it really that necessary for him to have to feel the pain of the robot? Wouldn't that be way more detrimental than useful? Like, it can't be that hard to tell when whatever giant monster you're fighting has hit your robot in like the arm or something. You don't need some stupid neural link to do that. You can just have an alert show up on the thing, can't you? Anyway, the point point I'm getting at here is that the Atlan's in the Doom universe do also have neural link technology in them, but here, whether or not it's a one-way connection or a stupid two-way connection isn't exactly clear to me. See, if it's a one-way connection and the Slayer's brain isn't being completely overwhelmed with entirely unnecessary giant robot data, then that explains why he's able to plug in without any issues. However, it could very well be a two-way connection all the same, and the Slayer's brain is indeed being completely overwhelmed with stupid giant robot data, and he's simply able to handle it without so much as wincing because he's the Doomslayer. I don't know, I know that was a bit of a tangent, but I feel like that perspective makes this little cutscene way more interesting, so I just thought I'd share. Anyway, from within the Atlan, the gameplay changes up quite a bit. To start, it doesn't have any guns or melee weapons, but the Slayer can punch, run, and even dodge while using it. Outside the giant robot church, the core of the barrier apparatus is destabilizing, and the call to evacuate the entire city is only just now ringing out, apparently. I don't know why they waited this long, but better late than never, I guess. Waltzing past the fallen Atlan of a Sentinel comrade, the level opens up a bit more, and it's here we get our first good look at what the city of Hebeth looks like from the eyes of an Atlan. My only issue with the Atlan is that when I look down, I can't see my legs. I know that may sound a little shallow, but that's always just been a huge immersion killer for me, and it's only made worse that I can see the puffs of dust from where the Atlan's supposed to be stepping, but I can't see what's making them. That being said, because I am a human male, the laws of nature make it biologically impossible for my brain to find any other type of fault with the Atlans. First off, not only do you get to crash through droves of helpless puny demons like you're piloting a giant robot, you get to fight titans in this thing, and the Slayer isn't some pansy old Sentinel pilot who can't even handle one titan. The combat in the Atlan is delightfully simple and fun. Basically, the longer you fight a titan, the more you punch it and the more of its attacks you dodge, the more your power builds up until you release a kind of finisher move where you clean its clock big time. These fights are amazing. It's mind-boggling to see the titan go crashing backwards, taking out buildings as he falls until he hits the ground in a giant puff of smoke. The ragdolls are very impressive. Also, the Atlan is quick. This thing can really move, and it's so immense that half the time you probably won't even notice what you're stepping on. See those little things down there? Those are hell tanks, amalgamations of demonic black magic made from the discarded corpses of fallen titans. They're unmanned, they don't have a crew or anything, they're actually organic beings, and if you destroy them, you can see blood come out of them. Ugh. Aw, look at that, it's a little manky. Soon, however, the fun is spoiled by some Sentinel soldiers telling King Novik that the core is going critical, which is sci-fi speak for hurry up. On the way over to the core, the Slayer meets a new Titan variant, the Cyclops Titan, which as the name suggests is a Titan that's been genetically modified by the priests of hell to only have one eye that it can use to unleash bolts of dark energy at its targets. And on top of that, it's also received cybernetic augmentations to make it stronger than its more common brethren. Man, that is a gnarly design. Breaking through a giant demonic flesh wall, the Slayer meets up with none other than King Novik himself, piloting his personal Royal Atlan, and the king tells the Sentinel support teams to drop some weaponry for our hero. The Slayer is then bestowed the Atlan Chain Gun, an enormous double rotary cannon that demolishes anything it's Wait, what? That's it? Oh. Yeah, the gun is great, but there's only like 5 or 6 titans you get to kill with it, and then the Slayer arrives at the core. Alright, tossing the chain gun aside, the Slayer rips out the faulty core of the barrier apparatus, and King Novik warns him it's gonna blow, to which Commander Thera says that there's a strip mine nearby. As the Slayer fights his way past some more titans, the Sentinels point out that the Maker ship has evacuated and they're not responding to any communications, which means the Slayer doesn't have any means of extraction. Commander Thera just says she'll come down and grab him herself, and the Slayer hops over a ravine and battles his way through some more titans until he arrives at the strip mine, an enormous crater that goes down for miles, but before he can toss the core in, an armored, burly titan gives him a cheap shot in the back, and after a good brawl with it, the Slayer gets an idea. level 2, guys, level 2. Now safe inside Commander Thera's ship, the Slayer overhears her discussing with the Sentinels that the Makers are requesting an immediate report. Alright, so before we end our little adventure here on Hebeth, let me elaborate a bit more on the relationship between the Makers and the Argenta real quick. So as I've said previously, the Makers are much more advanced than the Argenta and were the ones who made the Slayer even more powerful, which begs the question of why do they even bother with the Argenta in the first place? Well, it's because the Argenta have gained the ability through their understanding of ancient magic arts to create a powerful energy source they call Argent energy that they synthesize from the souls of long-dead godlike beings called wraiths. They then share this Argent energy with the Makers who desperately need it to keep their homeworld of Urdak fully functional, and the Makers share with them advanced technology and the occasional Slayer deployment as long as the Argenta keep up on their monthly payments for Makers on Prime. And that's really it, I think. Big Fatty here is simply tasked with using the Slayer to make sure the demons don't kill all the Argenta so that everyone back home on Urdak can keep the lights on. Basically, the motivation for everyone is this. The demons want the Heart of Argent, an ancient Sentinel artifact that's said to contain immense power. The Makers want Argent energy from the people of Argenta. The people of Argenta want to not die, and the Slayer just wants to kill demons. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the universe outside of Commander Thera's ship, a distressed Sentinel priest is pleading with an unseen figure for the soul of someone close to him to be given peace, and the camera pans to show he's talking with the giant floating head of Prince Azrak himself, who demands to know the whereabouts for the Heart of Argent. The priest tells him that he can tell Azrak where it is, but beyond that he'll be of no use to him. The Heart of Argent cannot be unlocked by mere mortals, and the scene ends with the priest alone in the secluded room, abandoned by the Dark Prince and with no answers to soothe his tortured mind. In the aftermath of the events on Hebeth, we find ourselves within the Sentinel Barracks on the Argentian homeworld of Argent Denur. The Hebeth transdimensional barrier has been destroyed, substantially increasing Prince Azrak's military power and mobility, and the Sentinels are preparing for his next move. Inside the control room, King Novik and Commander Thera are watching a hologram from the Sentinel priest that was used by Prince Azrak. He tells them that he sealed the Heart of Argent as best he could, but the demons are coming for him and he's sorry for what he's done. When the message ends, one of the Sentinel technicians plays an audio description for the MacGuffin of Argent, which is interesting because it suggests that they don't actually even know what it is, just that it's said to hold the soul of the last wraith, but Azrak definitely seems to have big plans for it, so Novik and Thera are gonna try and get to it before he can. The cutscene ends and we are brought back into the eyes of the Doomslayer, thoughtfully observing the serene landscape of Argent Denur, and you guessed it, the scale of the environment is once again absolutely breathtaking. Sentinel ships flying over the city, massive dark clouds with red lightning in the distance warning of the coming invasion, and I think I can even see what looks to be the skeletal remains of long dead titanic beasts thousands of feet below on the planet's surface. I really like the Sentinel architecture here too. It's got a very refreshing sci-fi Byzantine Empire look to it with all the rounded designs, which I prefer far more than just basic Gothic, since it works much better with the warrior culture of the Argenta, and honestly, in my opinion, Gothic architecture in games is starting to get a little old, so I'm happy to see something different. I took an art class a few semesters ago, and architecture was one of the two things in it I actually really liked learning about, so I pay attention to it quite a bit when I explore settings in a game. Although I don't really blame anyone for describing the architecture of Argent Denur as Gothic though, since I don't expect anyone to be able to identify the design patterns of ancient architectural aesthetics when they're playing a Doom game. And also, Gothic stuff is just so ubiquitous in video games, I think people just automatically assume any architecture in an even remotely medieval setting is gonna be Gothic. Anyway, weird rant about fictional buildings aside, the Slayer hears over his radio that the demons are on their way and heads through the Sentinel Barracks past lively soldiers praying clerics and frantic technicians until he finds himself a new weapon, the aptly named Skull Crusher, not to be confused with the tricep exercise, easily one of the most inventive weapon designs in the game. The codex entry for it explains that it was created by the corrupted mind of a Sentinel engineer under the influence of heretical Argentian cultists, and it was discovered by the Knight Sentinels in a raid, who now greatly fear the weapon and its infernal inner workings. The weapon crushes curse-marked demonic skulls and scatters their pieces at rapid speeds toward its targets, and as the Slayer holds it, you can see its engines trembling with anticipation, almost as if the weapon itself is hungry for the carnage to come. The Skull Crusher has got to be one of my favorite weapons in all of Doom, and I can't wait to upgrade the thing, since when it's fully powered up it can do some serious damage. Also, something weird you can do with it is that if you click the shoot button repeatedly, you'll see it slowly chew up a skull, but nothing will come out and it won't consume any ammo. Interesting. Anyway, after testing out his nifty new heater, the Slayer keeps moving through the barracks and steps back outside to see that the demonic invasion has fully begun. The scale of the level has gotten even bigger somehow. Sentinel and Hell carrier ships are floating all throughout the airspace, smaller battles can be seen being fought on lower levels of the city, enormous Sentinel anti-air guns blast flak into the sky, and the body of a gargantuan ancient being serves as an imposing backdrop for it all. After battling a new armored Mankey variant, the Slayer sees a statue of the Creed Maker himself, which makes me wonder if they either made it as a token of goodwill or because they've been working with him for some time now. Heading back into the Sentinel Barracks, the Slayer battles through some more demons, making short work of some Hell Knights with the nifty Skull Crusher until he eventually arrives at a large hall with a really cool overlook of King Novik's royal Atlan. There's some nice artwork in here too. I like this one of the Atlans coming home to the cheering Argentian people. That's pretty neat. Making his way through a Sentinel tank hangar, Commander Thera radios the Slayer to tell him that he's almost outside and that there's a path through the tombs nearby. Next to the gate, the Slayer finds an ornate golden statue holding a Sentinel ruby, a rare artifact and another form of currency that he can use alongside gold to purchase equipment upgrades at Sentinel shrines. Heading through the gate, the Slayer sees the quote-unquote path Commander Thera was talking about and drops on down to find another new weapon, the Impaler, a simple and incredibly fun weapon, although its codex entry shares that it's actually a rather archaic design that's been abandoned by the Knight Sentinel military force due to its burdensome weight and difficult manufacturing process. The Slayer, however, wields it with ease, and if you can hit your shots with it, you will be substantially rewarded by its high damage output and stopping power. It's also the first weapon to demonstrate the game's weapon pairing system in that it and the Shredder both share the Railspike ammo type. It's interesting to note too that both the Shredder and the Impaler have very similar visual designs. In the game files, they're actually stored as like the same model, and here in Blender you can see just how similar they are. See, they both have like the same receiver thing, I guess you could call that, the little metal thing that punches the spike. Pretty sick. Emerging from the Sentinel catacombs, the Slayer finds himself on the lower level of the city, and Commander Thera tells him that her father, who's up on one of the Sentinel carriers, is going to need some help, and then tells the Sentinel personnel to ready the Slayer's dragon for him. Before we can see what exactly that entails, the Slayer meets a new demon species, the Lost Soul, a wandering spirit of the damned whose essence has been eroded by the constant labor and torture of hell. Yet still it is denied destruction, endlessly wandering in search of the final judgment to release itself, which the Slayer is more than happy to provide. Hopping over a bridge and taking in yet another insane view, the Slayer defeats an armored Mankey leader to earn an armor boost and keeps moving through the chaotic city, even finding a group of cultists and another ruby until he arrives at the Dragon's Aviary. Just before he steps inside, however, he finds a codex entry for the Sentinel Barracks that explains the city he's currently in is named Taroth and was built atop the skeletal remains of the ancient Ancestrals, which I can only assume are those giant bodies we saw scattered throughout the mountains and valleys of the region. The codex entry explains additional details as well about the grueling recruitment process to become a Knight Sentinel and discusses the Order of Aratum, an elite Knight Sentinel mounted unit that rides dragons into battle. Bursting through a broken wooden gate, the Slayer meets a formidable new demon species, the Vagary, an imposing gigantic spider centaur demon decked out in golden armor that can't be overheated by the Slayer's weapons. Vagaries are rare, powerful demons spawned from the disgusting sludge spewing from the corpses of Hell's countless sinful denizens. They are without masters and have no real place in the traditional demon hierarchy and simply follow Prince Azrak's legions looking to feed on the suffering and agony of the unwilling. It's a tough battle. The Vagary's right arm cannon constantly unleashes blasts of projectiles, and it also likes to shoot a pesky poison cloud that slows the Slayer's movement. And the thing doesn't even fight fair. It summons Mankeys for help when its health gets low, but eventually the Slayer is victorious and he enters the Dragon Aviary, where an old friend has been waiting for him.
Thrusters online.
Dude, some of these cutscenes I just cannot narrate over. I don't care if this video ends up being 5 hours long, man. It would have been unethical for me not to show that. Yes, everybody, this game has giant robots and now electricity wing metal skull dragons in it, which does mean that it is mathematically the best video game ever created, so if you disagree I do apologize, but the chart doesn't lie. Now, even though that introduction was about as perfect as you could ever ask for, to avoid having to say the Slayer's Dragon 5 million times, I will now choose to reveal a few details about our noble winged companion before the game would otherwise organically reveal them. Firstly, the dragon has a name and a history. Its name is Sarat, derived from the plant genus Ceratula, a group of flowering plants in the Asteraceae family, which most notably includes within it the species of flowers known as daisies. When the Slayer first arrived in Sentinel lands, Sarat went against the will of his masters in the Order of Aram and chose the foreigner Slayer as his only superior. But in one fateful encounter against the forces of Hell known as the Battle of Black Pyres, Sarat became separated from the Slayer and was grievously wounded. In a rare instance of the Slayer doing anything other than tearing something's head off, he went out of his way to save Sarat's life, an act that Sarat would never forget. Noticing the unparalleled bond between Sarat and the Slayer, Commander Thera ordered her Sentinel engineers to enhance Sarat with cybernetics, fusing his primal ferocity with enhanced precision, and he has served as the Slayer's loyal ally ever since. As the dauntless duo fly through the Dragon's Den in the outskirts of the city, the game demonstrates Sarat's gameplay elements and how, just like the Atlan, much more emphasis is placed on timing and dodging, rather than brute force like the Slayer's gameplay. I find it a very welcome change of pace. It's not asking for much. Sarat controls nicely, none of the enemy projectile patterns are too ridiculous, and the environments get even more opportunities to show some juicy scale. Like, look at this giant ribcage we're flying through, holy moly. The game then introduces the mechanic of hell ships, aerial monstrosities not dissimilar to the horrifying biotechnology on display in Hell tanks. And while in previous levels they were out of the Slayer's reach, on the back of Sarat they're very much unsafe from him and act as sort of mobile treasure chests that drop goodies if you can blow them up before they escape. The only issue I have with hell ships is that they don't actually shoot back or really do anything. They just run like total pansies, so you're sort of just chasing after them for 15 seconds, blasting bits off their hide until they explode. Regardless, once the little tutorial is over, the pair take to the skies and head after King Novik to the Sentinel holy city of Aratum. Our adventure continues high above the clouds of Argent, where Surratt and the Slayer have arrived at the Sentinel's resplendent heavenly sanctum. Need I say it, once again the scale of the level is jaw-dropping. I don't even know what to say. This place is absolutely grand and awe-inspiring, and being on the back of Surratt doesn't make it feel any smaller in the slightest. Skyscraping statues of Maker angels looming over the bridges, monstrous hell carrier ships conducting their invasion, hundreds of Sentinel troops and demonic forces fighting on the ground below, enormous supportive structures dug into the gravity-defying mountainous foundational rock of the city, even more sci-fi Byzantine mixed with a bit of high Renaissance architecture on display, and a gigantic cathedral at the heart of it all, shielded by a demonic wall of dark magic. This is gonna be a blast, and from this point on, the game stops being linear and lets you choose where you want to go and what you want to do. You can chase down hell ships, take out gore nests, help out the Sentinel troops, and more, but the Slayer's main objective within the city is to destroy the 4 hell carriers that are powering the demonic wall, which he can do by taking out each of the carriers' turrets and then shooting their giant evil eyeballs. The hell carriers are once again similar to the hell tanks and hell ships in that they too are made out of unholy bone and sinew. These designs are really gnarly. I like the idea that the dark priests of hell, instead of using technology or their engineering degrees, create their war machines out of discarded bodies resurrected and grafted together with necromancy. It's an awesome visual style. When the Slayer takes down a hell carrier, he can then use Surratt to land on top of it so that he can go inside and finish off its crew members and blow up its engines. Within the depths of the first hell carrier, just as he arrives at its engine bay, the Slayer meets one of the most sinister demon species yet, the towering cyber demon, the highest members of Hell's demonic hierarchy just below their ruler, the brutal masters of all other demons, and a formidable enemy that requires the Slayer to be up close so he can deflect their attacks and stay safe from their arm cannons. When he takes the beast down, the Slayer is then able to directly attack the infernal heart of the Hell carrier itself, and upon doing so will be picked up by Surratt outside. Moving to the next ship, the Slayer disables its eye and crashes it down into the city, but when he hops inside, the path to the engines is locked, but there is a path outside that he can take instead. Killing some more demons and cultists, the Slayer swims through an underground reservoir to find some Sentinel soldiers guarding some citizens who are desperately praying to the Makers to protect them. Man, the city is just crazy detailed. You can see reliefs for the ancient wraiths, gigantic sculptures of Sentinel priests cut out of the bedrock, and every surface is just incredibly ornate and majestic. It's interesting to note as well that a lot of the Argentians up here are wearing monk outfits, which makes sense because Aratum serves as the theological center of Sentinel society, so I would assume that only the most devoted citizens are allowed to come up here. Finding a path back into the Hell carrier, the Slayer heads to its lower levels and is once again halted by a new Hell Knight variant, the Battle Knight, an armored, faster, and stronger alteration of the regular Hell Knights who are just as fun to fight, if not more so. Making short work of the Battle Knight and destroying Hell Carrier number 2, the Slayer once again lands on the back of Surratt and flies off to Hell Carrier number 3. However, blocking his path is a gargantuan hideous maw that looks more like a beak actually as opposed to a mouth growing out of the tendrils choking the city. But once the pair blow it to smithereens, they fly down into the city's stunning aqueducts. This is an awesome environment. There's a hell ship to blow up down here, but once I took it out, I actually flew back up to get a better look at all the reservoirs. This place is tremendous. And just when I thought I couldn't be any more impressed, the pair fly further down and reach the bottommost layer of the entire city, where we're able to see the colossal divine machinery that keeps the city afloat. You can even see the actual surface of Argent miles below, peeking through the clouds. Holy moly! Taking out the third helicarrier, Surratt drops the Slayer off in a crashed Sentinel ship beside its wreckage, where within he finds a new weapon, the Plasma Cycler, the Accelerator's big man on campus older brother, which uses the same plasma core technology cranked up to 10 and slices through demons big and small with ease. Sauntering through droves of demons with the unstoppable Cycler, the Slayer arrives at the engine room of the helicarrier and finds a codex entry inside for a Sentinel priest named D. Gloric, the very same priest we saw in the Hebeth ending cutscene earlier pleading with Prince Azrak about putting an unknown woman's soul to rest. As it turns out, the woman seems to have once been his wife. As a Sentinel priest, Deeg led a secluded, fatiguing life of preserving the ancient history of the Argentian people dating all the way back to the Wraiths, but he was able to find solace and comfort in his secret forbidden marriage to an Argentian commoner. Unfortunately, as we know now, it seems a certain set of circumstances led to his wife having her soul taken by the forces of hell, and Deeg was trying to negotiate with Prince Azrak so she wouldn't have to suffer anymore. Well, that's pretty cool to see some actual character motivation. Usually when it comes to like humans collaborating with hell, it's because they want power or they're insane. This dude just wants to help his wife. He doesn't even want her back or anything. He just doesn't want her to burn in hell for the rest of eternity. Destroying the engine of the third helicarrier, the Slayer lands on the back of Surratt outside once more, and the pair fly back up to the top of the city to take out the fourth and final helicarrier. Once they bring it down, the Slayer hops off onto a bridge across from an amazingly massive tower where he meets a new special type of enemy, an Enforcer Pinky. Enforcer demons are ones powered by a special demonic essence that empowers the demons around them with additional health and damage output, forcing you to focus on them before you're able to reliably take out anyone else. Once he defeats it, he sees a Sentinel airdrop nearby and opens it to receive a new weapon, the Super Shotgun, a joyously powerful mainstay of the Doom franchise given a sci-fi fantasy overhaul. The Super Shotgun was made as a gift for the Slayer when the Sentinel engineers saw just how much he liked his trusty combat shotgun. Using rare materials mined from deep within the caverns of Argent combined with a black powder derived from the fossilized remains of the ancient ancestrals, they constructed for him a weapon that fills the heart of all demonkind with uncontrollable fear and fills his heart with a bubbly, wholesome delight. Stepping inside the giant tower, the Slayer does a little puzzle solving and finds another group of pesky cultists who he kills before finding next to them another codex entry, this time for the city of Aratum itself. The sprawling stronghold is full of relics and texts from the very beginning of Argentian society, dating back to the age of Ancestrals when the people of Argenta still worshipped the Wraiths, even though in the present Argentian society, Wraith worship has been outlawed since the Makers have been chosen as their new deities. The city had been untouched by war and conflict up until now, as it was believed that to spill blood within it would invoke the wrath of the gods, although my analysis indicates that statement doesn't seem to be entirely correct and they're probably in their pajamas eating Cheerios right now. Regardless, heading outside onto the scaffolding of the tower, the Slayer drops down to a lower level and battles some more demons and a Mankey to find something very interesting, a small plastic toy of his dragon pal. Check that on out, that's adorable. With the destruction of the fourth helicarrier's engines, the demonic wall surrounding the central cathedral of the city is weakened, allowing Surratt and the Slayer to fly through an opening to Aratum's inner chambers. It's here where the heart of Argent is kept, and when they get there, masses of demons are waiting for them, including a vagary, although this one is noticeably lacking the golden armor that the champion vagary back at the Sentinel Barracks had, so he isn't as big of a problem. After a long fight, the Slayer gets rid of all the pesky invaders, and a cutscene plays where it's revealed Prince Azrak and the witch are already here, just outside the containment chamber of the Heart of Argent, and the witch uses some of her own plot armor to put up a magic barrier to stop the Slayer from getting near them. With the Slayer occupied by some more demon reinforcements, the witch and Azrak open the chamber, but just then King Novik shows up and tells a Sentinel General Commander Valen over his earpiece to ignite some charges and— Wait, you're blowing up the whole— They're start blowing up the whole city. Dude, there were still survivors there. What the hell is the matter with you, man? Oh my. As the city collapses, Novik throws a flashbang at Azrak and grabs the heart of Argent before getting extracted by Commander Valen. And outside we see the Makers have returned to pick the Slayer back up. What was the point of blowing up the whole city? Was that really necessary? Couldn't you have just flashbanged him and grabbed the thing and then left? What else was here that was so important to warrant blowing the entire place up like that? Anyway, that's the end of the level. Bit of an unfortunate end to such an amazing setting, but don't worry, this game still has plenty more in store for us. We pick back up in the Sentinel stronghold in the city of Taroth, back on the surface of the expansive world of Argent, where a massive demonic invasion is imminent. It's almost as if the entire planet seems to be trying to evacuate, and with the Sentinels in possession of the heart of Argent, King Novik has ordered the construction of a more secure vault for it in case the demons come and try to take it again. Commander Dira wisely suggests that he just give it to the Slayer, which actually is probably the single safest place in the entire universe for it, but with the Slayer back in the possession of the Makers, King Novik isn't sure he can really trust him with it because giving it to him would basically mean giving it to them. Back on the Maker's ship, the Slayer is once again being held within his containment cell, with the Maker drones in the command module discussing with the big fatty Creed Maker about what they should do. The drones are saying that the Argentians will be overrun and they should deploy the Slayer now, but the fatty Maker says that if they deploy the Slayer, then who's going to be there to protect them up on the ship? We then cut to inside the Slayer's containment chamber, where even though he's being held in some kind of trance, he's still able to hear the screams and cries of the Argentian people as they're overrun by the demonic invasion. It seems to greatly upset him, but I can't really tell if it's because he cares about the innocent people being slaughtered, or if it's because it means there's demons out there that need to be killed. Regardless, he becomes so enraged at what he's hearing that he actually manages to snap out of his trance, much to the Maker's distress, and when he tries tearing out the tether lock thing in his armor, it causes some sort of power overload for the entire containment cell. The drones try to increase the power in the floor magnets so he can't move, but it doesn't work on him, and the fatty Maker tells his subordinates to just shut the thing off before he kills them all. With the Slayer's body and mind now free, he gets to work breaking down the walls of his cell, and the drones ask the Creed Maker if they should pull the plug on him, so to speak. But the fatty Creed Maker prudently says it would be ill-advised to kill the Khan Maker's most prized possession, although as long as he still has that tether lock in him, they still have some degree of control. The scene then cuts back to the Sentinels within Taroth, where Commander Valen sees enormous fleets of hellships and entire legions of demonic ground troops approaching the city, but luckily they're able to deploy the giant city-wide force field wall that I guess they didn't install for Aratum, but it looks like the one down here works somewhat. Just then, the Creed Maker calls King Novik on his cell and frantically tells him, Mr. Novik, we're launching the Slayer now, please send ships up to us so we also don't die. Alright, thank you, bye-bye. Commander Thera tells him thanks, and we find ourselves in the eyes of the Slayer once more, on the ground in the stronghold hangar bay with his sights set on the playground of demon killing waiting for him outside. I gotta say, the inside of the hangar is pretty cool. Just like everything else in this game, the scale is off the charts, but it's also cool to see all the citizens waiting to get on the evacuation ships taking refuge in the hangar. I don't know, man, I know I keep saying it, but I just love that we get to see stuff like this. So many games that are trying to sell the idea of a city or planet being invaded just only show like the soldiers that you're fighting with against the invasion force, or worse yet, you show up after the invasion has already happened and you just see dead bodies everywhere. It's so cool to actually be in the chaos as it's happening. Once again though, holy crap, I feel like such a kindergartner standing next to everyone, and it piqued my curiosity so much about why exactly everyone here is so tall. I checked the game files, and after importing the models into Blender, the Slayer is actually at least a little bit visibly larger than everyone else, so I guess this view model camera is just really low to the ground for some reason. I don't know. Anyway, the Slayer starts moving to get around the city force field, which they aren't able to just turn off for him, for obvious reasons, and here's Commander Thera conversing with the Sentinel soldier over the radio who says it looks like the Creedmaker is staying put this time. Commander Thera surmises that it must be because the last time he tried to bail, he probably got chewed out for it. The Sentinel energy production of Argent is limited due to the demonic invasion, and the Creed faces execution if he's not able to keep the Argentians alive so they can keep making it. Moving through the lower levels of the city, the Slayer finds more groups of civilians rushing to escape, and also a rare type of Argentian soldier that I very briefly showed a little demo card of way earlier in the video back in level 1 that I feel I should elaborate a bit more on. Now, some of you may already know who these guys probably are, but let me explain for people unaware. Alright, so in Doom Eternal, the previous game in the franchise, hands down the single greatest enemy demon of the entire game was a gregarious chap named the Marauder, a reoccurring enemy that served as a mini-boss basically every encounter it showed up in. Now, the backstory of the Marauders is that before they became demons, they were elite Sentinel warriors who were said to have been trained by the Slayer himself and served as his personal battle brothers during combat. Many in the community believe that these fellows here in Doom the Dark Ages are the Marauders before they abandoned their allegiance to Argenta, which is supported by numerous aspects such as their similar armor patterns, their indicated higher status within the Sentinel military, and the fact that they're all clearly male just like all the Marauders were. However, part of me kind of wants to believe that these dudes aren't the bona fide Marauders per se and are instead just elite Sentinel warriors because, like, I guess this is a spoiler alert, but there's really nothing special about them at all here. We don't see them do anything at all besides stand around for the whole game. I mean, these dudes are supposed to be the best of the best. Night Sentinels so powerful they could keep up with the Slayer in combat. And in Eternal, that iconic entrance scene is an incredible little build-up for the fight. The Marauder says like 5 lines and each one is laced with history and character. It's juicy stuff and does a ton to build up the relationship between the Slayer and his former companions, but here we just don't get to see any of that besides that they're just here. I mean, it's literally just, oh yeah, remember the Marauders? Here they are. I don't know, I definitely think they could have done a lot more with these guys besides just giving them the basic Easter egg treatment. They could have at least had one awesome moment, but here's hoping that a future DLC expands on them a little more. Arriving outside at the city's main gate, the Sentinels drop down a very interesting new tool for the Slayer. A specially designed flail, very fitting of the sci-fi fantasy setting. The flail can be used in place of the Slayer's power gauntlet and outputs much more damage to armor and shields than the Slayer's punches do, although it's a little bit slower, so the two are still pretty balanced. Once he exits through the city's towering main gate, the Sentinel troops rather comically slam it shut behind the Slayer, who is now tasked with destroying the 5 hell portals enabling the ground invasion on this side of the city. This is once again another free roam area and it's very expansive, but as always, to avoid tedium, I'll only be hitting on the important stuff instead of narrating every single thing he does, and I'll also be taking the opportunity to discuss some more little gameplay elements and whatnot. Okay, so number 1, as the Slayer is fighting through the first hell portal, he meets a new demon species, the Arachnotron, a hideous 4-legged hellish beast with a giant minigun grafted into its big brain body. Its codex entry explains that these things are actually blind and detect movement and activity through psionic waves in their leathery cortex. They have pretty high damage output even over long ranges, but they're very weak since any part of them that isn't their legs is their brain, which will count for double damage just like any normal headshot would. By the way, just so everybody knows, even though he's never said anything so far, the Slayer isn't actually completely silent. If he gets hit, he'll make some variation of an sound, which normally would be something I really hate. It's kind of a silly pet peeve of mine that I hate it when my game character makes a noise when they get shot or beat up. I don't know, I just think it gets old fast and it can be distracting or worst of all annoying, but the Slayer doesn't actually seem to do it very often. Regardless, after taking out the first hell portal, the Slayer uses a purple key to open a door to a small underground shrine where he finds another toy just like the one he found for Surat, although this one is for himself. I wonder if there's any lore explanation for these beyond just being collectibles, like if there's some Argentian alien toy maker that leaves little trinkets around, knowing that the Slayer likes scavenger hunting for stuff. Outside, the Slayer actually runs into a Hell tank, and even though he's not in a nigh indestructible Atlan this time, Hell tanks are really no less easier to deal with. Deflect a single shot back at them and they'll blow right up in one hit. Over on the left side of the wall, the Slayer encounters a bizarre new enemy, a 5-story tall tentacle rising out of the demonic consumption in the ground, although it too, like the Hell tank, can be pretty easily taken care of with some deflections and melees. The tentacle's codex entry explains that they don't actually seem to originate from Hell, instead they come from an as of yet unknown dimension called the Cosmic Realm, and it's believed they're some sort of biological extension of an unknown sinister intelligence. Now, as I was exploring the rest of the expanse outside the city, I realized a kind of strange tendency that demons with metal shields would often spawn into the world with their shields already overheated. If you remember earlier, I explained that superheated shields can be blown up using the Slayer's shield throw, so I think them actually spawning with them already overheated might be some kind of glitch, because you would think that the idea behind the overheating mechanic is that you would be rewarded for overheating the shield yourself, but most of the time I never had to do that. I just see that their shield is already overheated, toss the Slayer shield, and bam, nice little explosion. I don't know, just a weird thing I noticed. Eventually, the Slayer soon comes upon a small village in the outskirts of the city limits, and if you look up into the sky, you can actually see Prince Azrak's gigantic Hell Carrier flagship off in the distance. Very cool detail. After a small skirmish in an enclosed area with an uncomfortable amount of explosive barrels, the Slayer enters a portal to an underground chamber where a group of heretical cultists are conducting dark rituals to sustain the invasion. But before the Slayer can get to them, he needs to do some puzzle solving, and upon completing the puzzle, he finds a unique new weapon, not one that came from a Sentinel airdrop, but instead one that's suspended by some kind of dark energy within a strange broken obelisk. Its codex entry explains that it's called the Chain Shot, an ancient artifact that the Sentinels locked away millennia ago out of great fear of its mysterious origins. It's said to contain within it a sentient malevolence that gnaws away at the edges of its wielder's sanity, and its ancient lore holds that it was crafted by the primeval deities that once held dominion over the stars. The Chain Shot is an awesome weapon. It shoots a very powerful metal core at its target and has excellent stopping power. It can also be charged up to deal even more damage, and the design of the thing is just incredible. It's constructed out of this very sturdy looking, almost otherworldly material, and if you look at the back of it, you'll notice small chunks of it appear to have withered away, which to me very closely resembles decaying or diseased bone marrow, like the weapon itself is alive and being eaten away by its own dark energies. Just tremendous design. Making his way to the center of the village, the Slayer meets a new type of leader enemy, one with powerful shields that require him to eliminate other demons to reduce its morale. When he kills enough of them, the leader Mankey's shields will be disabled, and then he's able to take it down as well. Finishing up in the destroyed village, the Slayer returns to the city outskirts and takes out the last couple of hell portals, and upon doing so, he hears Commander Thera over his radio graciously thank him, saying that they can now begin evacuating civilians. However, he also hears over his radio that increased seismic activity has been detected in the region, which means that a Titan or maybe even Titans have been deployed. As he makes his way over to where the bellowing demonic roars are emanating from, he finds a codex entry for the Creed Maker that explains his role in the Argenta Hell War that I talked about earlier. The Creed Maker is a newly elected bishop of the Maker High Ministry, and as I've said, the only reason he's actually here is basically so he can maintain the flow of life-giving Sentinel energy back home to his people on Urdak, and he was given the Slayer to use as a tool to maintain Maker control over the galactic region. Soon, the Slayer comes upon the source of the seismic activity. A Sentinel Atlan is battling a Titan over on the bridge connecting the city to the other side of the valley. But before he goes to get a closer look, he finds another codex entry, this time for the city of Taroth. The entry explains that the lands outside of Taroth's walls are stained with legacies of old wars burnt into the very ground itself, and within the lower levels of the city lie the merchant and industrial districts who are now left exposed to the rampaging hordes of Prince Azrak's demons. Even still, the ruins of the battlefield field outside the city are said to inspire the Argentian people with grim determination to continue their valiant battle against Hell regardless. Finally arriving at the battle site where the Titan and Atlan are engaged in combat, the Slayer realizes that the Sentinel pilot in the Atlan actually seems to have it mostly under control, so he just heads back to the city to see if he can get some bigger equipment of his own. However, just as he smashes through a metal grate to get back inside, a gigantic hell portal opens up right outside with an enormous armored Titan crawling through it. The Atlan that was battling the Titan from earlier seems to have earned a hard-fought victory and tries to make a heroic last stand against the new armored Titan, but kinda ends up getting its ass kicked, and the Titan throws it against the force field wall, shattering it with force, and now the city is unprotected. Nice try, I guess. With the shield disabled, the Titan starts breaking down the main gate of the city, but Commander Thera radios the Slayer and tells him another one of those bullshit superpowered turrets is in the courtyard and he can use that to take it down. Well, I'm glad to see the Sentinels are investing in these things to some extent. Yeah, one for an entire city is a little lax, but it's better than nothing, I guess. Hopping onto the turret, the Slayer cuts down hordes of demons until the Titan breaks through the gate, and just as before, he uses the supercharged bolts of the turret to blow it to pieces, and its corpse provides a nifty little makeshift barrier between the city and the demons outside. Commander Thera then says that the evacuation is almost complete, but the demons are inside the stronghold now, so the Slayer starts climbing up to get back to her. King Novik then says that the demons are coming after the heart of Argent, so he's gonna go draw their attention so the remaining lifeboats can get away safely, to which Commander Thera exasperatedly tells him not to go alone, but he mutes her before she can explain the 5 billion reasons why that's a monumentally stupid idea. Making his way back through the city, the Slayer soon meets a new demon species, the Revenant, a skeletal flying specter that's placed somewhere in the middle of the demon hierarchy, bound by no loyalty except to the brief release from torment they feel when they inflict anguish on their victims. They can be a bit of a pain. They have a move where they basically turn invincible for a bit and you have to wait to be able to damage them again. Chain Shot makes short work of them though. The Slayer continues through the burning ruins of the city. He battles wave after wave of demonic invaders until he finds another codex entry for the city of Taroth that explains it stands as a symbol of Argentian unification and hope, since within its walls the Sentinel clans that usually find themselves at odds with each other have allied against their common enemy, the forces of Hell. Eventually, the Slayer arrives back at the hangar of the stronghold where he then covers the exit of the final evacuation carriers. It's a pretty crazy visual to see just how much the place has changed over the course of the level. The civilians that were hiding in the hangar are now all gone. The dogfights in the sky are no longer taking place as the flak turrets are back online, keeping the skies clear for the evacuation ships, and the entire vista is cast in a murky orange glow from the raging wildfires consuming the lands below. Undeterred, the Slayer ignores the hangar announcement system warning that emergency protocols are in effect and continues battling droves of demonic hordes on his way to Thera and Novik. And after a fight against a particularly tanky battle knight, seriously, I think this guy took more hits than like 2 cyber demons put together for some reason, he hears over his radio the demonic presence around King Novik is rising, and Commander Thera politely asks that he hurry up. Upon taking the elevator up to the highest level of the city, a cutscene starts where we see that King Novik has already been apprehended by Prince Azrak. But it doesn't take long for the Slayer to arrive, and after breaking through the door on some Anakin Skywalker lightsaber type of shit, he starts doing a little swag walk towards Prince Azrak, no doubt savoring the moment, but just then the witch blindsides him with her Harry Potter powers. And it actually works. The Slayer is blasted off the side of the wall and lands all the way down on the ground next to the busted Atlan. Well, that's what happens when you hot dog. Triumphantly taking the heart of Argent off the grievously weakened King Novik, Prince Azrak unlocks the seal to see... Wow, nice job, King Novik. This was indeed merely a distraction. The real heart of Argent is elsewhere, and the old king here did a pretty good job of ensuring his people's safety. You know what I would have done? I would have put it in my brother's car's glove box. Nobody would have found that shit. You'd have to go in there with a pickaxe and a hard hat with the light on it to journey resumes in the northern frontier of Argent within the Airborne Sentinel command station, where Commander Thera is discussing with her subordinates the situation surrounding the Slayer. It looks like the Makers have lost control of him for good this time. The Creed Maker was nowhere to be seen during the debacle on Taroth, and the Slayer is now hanging out with Thera, trying to figure out how to get rid of his pesky tetherlock. Thera implies that she and her team of engineers know more about his own armor than he does, and there's no way to get the lock off. It's rigged to a bomb within the plating itself, and they've got more important matters to deal with right now. She explains that the heart of Argent is made up of two parts. The one half, the pendant-looking thing, is now in possession of Azrak and the Witch, and the other half, its power source, is somewhere else in an unknown location. Oh, well, I guess the Novik really was carrying the actual heart of Argent, and he just kind of got lucky that it doesn't work without the power source thing. Regardless, Thera says their next move is to get to the power source before Azrak and the Witch do, and the Slayer lets her know that he's more than happy to help. The scene then cuts to the Creed Maker's ship, where we see inside that one of the drones has been possessed by Azrak's malevolence and has killed all the other drones in the containment module. The Creed, watching everything unfold, prepares to fire upon the possessed drone, but just then Prince Azrak speaks through his avatar to the Creed Maker, asking to be heard. The Creed tells his lieutenant to contact the Ministry and allows the possessed drone to speak, listening as Azrak explains just how few options the Creed has now that he's unable to control the Slayer and is in no position whatsoever to protect the Argentian people. Azrak invites the Creed to join him and the Witch, but the Creed answers by using the cell's containment measures on the puppet drone, and the scene ends with a rather poignant shot of the Creed Maker completely alone in the realm, no doubt coming to terms with the creeping realization that with no more pawns to use, he may soon end up becoming one himself. We are then brought once again into the eyes of the Doomslayer, having been deployed by Commander Thera to the Abyssal Forest, a dark, sprawling woodland deep within the wilderness of Argent, where the Slayer has been sent to seek out the Ancestral Forge. Maybe I missed something, but I don't know why they couldn't have just dropped him off at like the front door of the forge itself instead of all the way out here in some random forest. But anyway, as you watch me explore and battle through the opening section of the level, I'd like to take the time to discuss that last cutscene because oh man, it was dope. However, it may have rightly raised some eyebrows based on a very particular observation. Cutscene Slayer does not equal gameplay Slayer. I understand and really love how the Slayer is characterized as a full-blown autist, his primarily non-verbal or otherwise non-existent communication, his hyperfixations, his lack of or disregard for social graces, the way he has trouble fitting in with the rest of society and how they alienate him, and of course the fact that he may or may not have just an ever so tiny degree of difficulty regulating his emotions. But come on, the guy we play as who tears his enemies to pieces and deflects multiple attacks at once from demons the size of a small house can't be this autistic to hot dog while he has the two antagonists in front of him dead to rights. If it were gameplay Slayer in that cutscene, it probably would have played out something more like this. But seriously though, this is the first real interaction we've seen between the Slayer and the Witch, and she's definitely proven that she's not to be underestimated. I do really like that she lives up to her characterization as a centuries-old cosmic goddess who draws power from the realm of eternal madness and stuff, and I like that the Slayer has now found an opponent he cannot afford to play with. But what about Azrak though? Just as before with the situation in Aratum, the Witch was the one really doing all the work, and this is the second time she's bailed this dude out of certain death. To be fair, even though the young prince hasn't dared yet go toe-to-toe with the Slayer, his demonic horde is incredibly effective, and this is the second Argentian city they've completely sacked. Well, I guess I just sort of answered my own question. Azrak and the Witch both address each other's weaknesses with their strengths. Azrak has an army but no Harry Potter magic, the Witch has Harry Potter magic but no army, and they work together to accomplish their goals. Such an incredible display of the power of multicultural collaboration. Even though it's always hard to see the Slayer actually get bested in any way because he is the power fantasy guy, I actually quite like the way this story is shaping up. Azrak and Ulsamir are two pretty strategic and perceptive villains, and defeating them may not be as simple as a quick swag walk and a flail smash. Novik is still a bit of a poopy head though. Idiot, you should have put the heart of Argent in the DMV filing system or something, come on. Anyway, autistic rant aside, back to the game. Making his way through the abyssal forest, the Slayer meets a new demonic species, the agile Whiplash, a skittish snake-like demon that comfortably sits high in the demon hierarchy, serving as the matron of Hell's torture pits, whose codex entry explains that they serve with the high priests of Hell as historians of the underworld's loathsome past. These fine ladies are pretty fun, but occasionally they seem to spend more time running away from the Slayer as opposed to fighting him, and even though they can be pesky, they don't have a lot of health or damage output, so they're still not as big a problem as maybe a Hell Knight or a Mancubus. Smashing through some tree branches, the Slayer finds a codex entry for the abyssal forest that explains it was once hallowed ground for the Night Sentinels, where they would commune with their deities in peace, but on one fateful day the whispers of hell crept through the minds of the Sentinel clerics and corrupted them to enact a demonic summoning rite that transformed the lush roots of the trees to demonic tendrils, spreading the plague of evil and mutating the forest into a nightmarish expanse. Arriving at the forsaken Sentinel outpost where the corrupted monks enacted the ritual mentioned in the codex, the Slayer battles a few hordes and solves a few puzzles until he gets treated to an absolutely breathtaking vista. Stretched across the entire horizon is the ossified body of a colossal ancestral dragon, one that bears striking resemblance to the Sentinel Wintherin, but what's more striking is the sword piercing its heart. What I want to know is who or what put that there. Nearby, the Slayer takes a lift down into the abandoned mines that were created to harvest materials from the bodies of the ancient ancestrals, wherein he finds a new weapon, the heavy-hitting quote-unquote grenade launcher, a burdensome cannon designed as a deployable stationary weapon that the Slayer instead opts to wield as very mobile artillery. I love this thing, very elegantly brings the traditional rocket launcher concept to the medieval sci-fi setting of the game. Watch you don't get too close to whatever you're aiming at though. Battling through the caverns, the Slayer arrives at the entrance to the Ancestral Forge, but his path is obstructed by one of the rarest and most powerful demon species of all, a mythical Agadon hunter. These towering animalistic beasts are much like the Slayer in that they too are outlanders to the abhorrent realm of Hell. Once noble warriors from distant worlds, they were corrupted by Hell's dark priests who twisted their bodies and minds to serve only Prince Azrak and his endless legions. Their enhancements are designed specifically to equal the Slayer in combat, and that definitely shows in the guy's boss fight, although he definitely takes his time. When the hunter has his shield up, you can't attack him and he can't really attack you, so you're both just kind of sitting there waiting and dodging his 3 very simple skull projectiles until you can fight him again. I think he's a dope boss, but I would definitely think he works better as like a mini boss when he has other demons to back him up, so you have something to do during the downtime, and thankfully this won't be the last we see of him. With the defeat of the Agadon hunter, the Slayer is now able to enter the Ancestral Forge, and even though it might not quite have the same scale as a level like Aratum, I definitely think the echoing chest cavity of a dead titanic dragon makes for a pretty cool environment. You can even see the sword itself that took it down. It seems I was wrong to say it pierced its heart, but it came pretty close. Commander Thera explains that the dragon's massive heart powers the forge, but it hasn't been used in a while, so he'll have to do a bit of electrical work before he can turn it back on. By the way, I forgot to mention earlier that the whole reason why the Slayer was sent here in the first place isn't actually to look for the heart of Argent's power source, it's to upgrade his gear with a new energy that Thera thinks will give him an upper hand over Azrak and the Witch. And after dropping down onto a ledge above some ancestral gastric acid, he learns in a codex entry how she likely plans to do it. The entry explains that in the times before the Argentians, titanic beings known as the Ancestrals ruled the world of Argent and Ner, primal beasts who constantly clashed with one another in battles of unimaginable ferocity and destruction. Two of these beings were called Taroth the Mighty and Elderax the Wise, and in one fateful struggle, Taroth would plunge his skyscraping sword deep into Elderax's stomach in an act that created the very mountain range that his body would be cradled in for the rest of eternity. Within Elderax's remains, the Sentinel engineers and blacksmiths have created a legendary forge powered by materials mined from within the beast itself, turning its bone and blood into powerful weapons and arcane fuel. That must be why the interior of this thing looks the way it does. It's been mined and worked in for so long that it barely even resembles a body anymore until you look up at the places the Argentian miners never got to. The codex entry concludes by sharing that in bygone eras it was said that the most powerful Sentinel priests were capable of awakening dormant energies within Taroth's gigantic sword, imbuing the ancestral blood it caused to spew from Elderax with an otherworldly arcane power. Holy crap, dude, the Ancestrals are an amazing part of this game's lore. This tiny tale between Elderax and Taroth is beyond gnarly. They add so much juice to Argent and Ner's history and immaculately exemplify the mesmerizing scale of the Doom universe. If you remember, in earlier levels you can see other enormous skeletons that likely belong to ancient ancestrals as well, but the fact that we only learn about these two actually adds to the mystery and makes them even more fascinating to me. With all the power switches pulled and the engines of Elderax's heart primed, Commander Thera says the forge is ready to be used and tells the Slayer to come and meet her over by the elevator. Entering the forge's sprawling inner workings, the Slayer navigates its monolithic actuators until he finds on a platform a codex entry for King Novik of all people. The entry explains that Novik has ruled for over 40 years and wasn't always the pensive leader we now know him as. In his youth he was a valorous and boastful warrior, but his demeanor changed with the unfortunate death of his wife the Queen. Their daughter Thera remains at his side as the heir to the throne, aiding him in his efforts to defend the Argentian people against the forces of hell and maintain their faith in the maker gods they worship. Interestingly enough, however, it seems that at the time the Ancestral Forge was built, wraith worship was instead still very much the cultural norm of Argentian society, and the Slayer can see statues and iconography dedicated to the Argentians' old gods as he proceeds towards Commander Thera. Soon finding her Sentinel escort, the Slayer enters the innermost chamber of the forge and a cutscene plays where the pair finally link up at the central elevator. Commander Thera explains to the Slayer that Ancestrals never really die, tells him to drop his shield onto the basin and performs a ritual in which she awakens the forge's heart, reinvigorating its veins and arteries until the sword of Taroth drips with Elderax's arcane blood right onto the Slayer's shield, imbuing it with divine ancestral might. It's some kooky stuff and even leaves the Slayer a little spooked, but it's dope, and even the Creed maker, who's been watching through the Slayer's tether lock this whole time, seems to agree. Yeah, I guess it's a magic lock, a bomb, and a camera all in one. Boy, those maker engineers really weren't messing around. Once the cutscene is over, a weird kind of jump happens where the Sentinel escorts say the demons are here and a bunch of enemies spawn right behind the Slayer. It's strange because Commander Thera just seems to sort of disappear. Like, I don't know, she was just here and now she's gone and the Slayer has to fight a bunch of demons. It's very video gamey. But regardless, it's where the game demonstrates the new shield rune system, where the Slayer can use his newly empowered shield to bring more ruin to demonkind and upgrade it to unlock cool new shield-based abilities. With the death of the leader Manky boss, Thera and the Slayer's work here is done, and the next level takes us to a place you may have been waiting to see for quite some time now. Our adventure continues in the bowels of the underworld, where the Slayer casually steps out of a portal onto a gorgeous scenic overlook. The scene then cuts to inside of Prince Azrak's sinister fortress, where we see that the Creed Maker has stabbed his Argentian subjects in the back. He's graciously accepted Azrak's offer and is making plans to lead him and the witch to Commander Thera. The reason is because the witch seems to have spotted something within Thera herself, some kind of untapped power that she believes can be used as a substitute for the soul of the Wraith that was said to have resided within the heart of Argent Pendant. Basically, Commander Thera herself is the new MacGuffin now, okay, but only these three know it. The witch tells Prince Azrak that her services to him have been completed, the heart of Argent is found, and now she wants him to return her god to her. Yikes, I kinda thought she was god of whatever nightmare dimension she came from, but apparently there's something else out there that even she bows down to. The cutscene ends with us returning to the perspective of the Slayer once more, joyously bounding his way through the underworld like a kid on Christmas. Over his radio, Thera explains that her and her Sentinel army have tried to attack here before, but they weren't able to really get anywhere even with their Atlan escorts. But if the Slayer is able to find any of them still laying around, he might be able to get them working again. Stepping outside of the cave, we're greeted with our first beautiful look at the marvelous fiery domain. Doesn't it just look lovely? Crucified titans, fleets of hell carriers floating ominously, volcanoes billowing choking black smoke into the sky, and a terrifying gigantic rune spinning over Azrak's horrifying citadel. And of course, it's also full of neighborly citizens all eager to shake the Slayer's hand and make him feel right at home. After dealing with the first welcome party, the Slayer finds in a Sentinel airdrop a new weapon, the rocket launcher, another cannon with a similar design to the grenade launcher that instead fires self-propelled rocket projectiles that explode on impact. I'm not really sure which one of them I prefer more actually. I like the grenade launcher because it's a little bit more fun to aim, and I think it even does a tiny bit more damage, but the rocket launcher is pretty sick too, and I don't damage myself with it nearly half as much. Stepping past the gated community entrance into the free roam area of the level, the Slayer kills some demons and finds some goodies until he comes upon a codex entry that gives us a bit of backstory for the Forsaken Plains, the region of hell that the Slayer currently finds himself in. The Abyssal Keep, the name given to Azrak's fortress, has existed in hell for eons now and has served as the seat of power for innumerable dark lords before being claimed by the young Prince Azrak, whose ruthlessness and cunning solidified his rule. At the outset of the war with Hell, King Novik attempted to lead an attack on the keep itself but was overmatched by Azrak's adept military strategy, a trait unseen in the rulers that came before him, and the failed invasion resulted in the keep being viewed by the Sentinels as an unassailable bastion of Hell's dominion. Well, should have brought more Atlans. I only see like 2 or 3 here. Regardless, the Slayer's been tasked by Commander Thera with disabling the Hell anti-air guns, keeping the skies clear, because apparently that's gonna let them use the Atlans again. Okay, after grabbing a purple key, the Slayer uses it to open a gate to find another codex entry, this time for Prince Azrak himself. The entry explains that Azrak is one of very few demons with an intellect that matches his evilness levels, and while all other demonkind cowered before the one they called the Doom Slayer, he instead stood in front of the High Council of Hell and explained to them his plan to take him down for good. By ancient blood oath, he was given the right to rule Hell's endless hordes, and through his pact with the witch, an otherworldly sorceress from a distant realm, his power over the worlds outside of Hell is steadily growing. And other than those 2 codex entry, there's not much else for me to really talk about in this level, since it's basically entirely just combat encounters with no new enemies. I guess I can levy some criticism at what I believe to be a very well-made but frankly pretty unimaginative environment. Yes, if you really like the design of the traditional interpretation of Hell, grotesque body horror everywhere, spiky repellent architecture, reddish-orange lighting, and of course demons crawling around on every surface, then this is the place for you, but I mean you can get really creative with the design of Hell. I understand that this look for Hell has been an established thing in the universe since Doom 2016, but that doesn't mean they couldn't have gone outside the box a little bit. Look at the blood swamps from Doom Eternal, this weird foggy environment with bizarre enormous organic structures looming in the clouds. Very interesting and fresh interpretation of what Hell could be like, but I guess they just wanted to keep things safe for the Dark Ages, but you don't get any extra points for safe. One thing I did notice, however, is that the Wintherin flying in the skies above Hell are actually different from the ones in Argent and I don't mean like a basic texture swap, they actually have pretty different models and everything. That's a neat detail, especially considering that they're so high up you can barely see them. I appreciate that amount of attention being given to set dressing stuff. Alright, I've been putting it off for long enough. It's time to talk about this soundtrack. With the very unfortunate and infuriating situation surrounding Mick Gordon's, we'll just say, departure from working with id Software, the biggest question with Doom the Dark Ages was whether or not its developers could find a way to live up to his legendary talent. So they hired Finishing Move Inc., a musical group consisting of 4 members with a history in music development for various projects, including games, movies, TV shows, ad campaigns, and more. But can their soundtrack stand up to the previous ones? Honest answer? No. But not because their music is bad, it's because it has to live up to the standards set by Mick Gordon. More people know the name of the guy who made this soundtrack for the Doom games than the name of the guy who actually made the games themselves. The amount of passion, talent, and skill he poured into his work for the Doom games was unprecedented, and it would be a gross understatement to say that the franchise would not be the same as it is now without him. There's really nothing I can say to do him justice. But management happened, and then along came Finishing Move Inc. to pick up the pieces made of what should have been the greatest everlasting sound design team in all of gaming. And frankly, I think Finishing Move gave it their best shot. No, these tracks are not on the same level as BFG Division or Vega Core or Cultist Base. How could they be? Finishing Move Inc. is not Mick Gordon, but I'm not ashamed to say that some of these tracks were pretty decent and memorable enough that yeah, I actually came back to add them to a few personal playlists of mine. If a movie or game soundtrack has me do that, I think it did its job pretty well. I mean, it seems to me like these guys stepped up and really took a crack at replicating some of Mick's brilliance. I've been hating the idea of even talking about the soundtrack in this video, but I can't make a video about a Doom game and not talk about the soundtrack. Look, that's even more precedent that Mick Gordon had set, because I knew that by doing so it would make me feel guilty as for saying all the good things I've said about this game so far, because deep down a part of me knows that every single thing Mick Gordon said had to have been true. Like, are we really gonna believe a single word that comes out of the stupid Bethesda id PR team's mouth on a Reddit post when 99.999% of the time these situations are entirely the management's fault and not the creatives? Like, these situations aren't even remotely specific to the video game or entertainment industry at all. Everybody's been fucked over by a stupid manager before. It's always their fault. Look, it's an enormous discussion, one that I could and probably should make a whole video on, since that might give me an opportunity to discuss the Trepang soundtrack as well. But for the purpose of this video, I'll just say this. The soundtrack for Doom the Dark Ages is mathematically the worst one of the modern Doom franchise. Not because it's bad, but because they got rid of Mick Gordon. After the Slayer kills a ton of demons, he grabs a giant robot battery from a busted giant robot and puts it in a different one that's in better shape. Alright, so we're back in an Atlan actually, and it looks like the Slayer is planning to lead a one-man Atlan assault on Azric's fortress itself. There are of course some Titans guarding the place, but once he takes care of them, he opens a Sentinel airdrop to find a new Atlan weapon. The Atlan shotgun, a massive cannon of destruction that seems to outright ignore any armor that enemy Titans are wearing, and it's already over. Okay, not only are these Atlan guns gun sections being so short pretty disappointing. It's a pain for us at FMP because of how hard it is to fit them in the studio to make the model diagrams. Anyway, the Slayer hops out of his Atlan and approaches Azric's citadel, but not before finding a basin of enchanted liquid just like the one at the Ancestral Forge that he uses to obtain a new shield rune. I don't know why that's here of all places, but regardless, after disposing of one last group of Azric's bodyguards, the Slayer brings down the gate to the fortress and steps inside. But Azric is out for lunch, so all he really has for the Slayer at the moment is an Agadon hunter and a few revenants. When the Slayer defeats them, Thera says that the Creed Maker has called a meeting with her specifically, and she's requesting that the Slayer returns to protect her. Seeing as how Azric literally isn't home right now and there's not much else for him to do here, the Slayer obliges and steps through a portal, ending the level. The portal returns us to Thera's Sentinel command station, where we can see that the Creed Maker is also present as the Slayer moves through the facility's lower levels. However, he soon finds himself in a room where he is denied access to leave, and after he frustratedly checks the other doors to see if he can go through them, he realizes he's locked inside. In addition, loud, heavy vibrations are shaking the entire station. The attack has begun, and Thera orders that the Creed Maker be taken to a secure room, but the Slayer is still busy trying to find an alternate route to Thera because of all the locked doors. Seems the facility's controls have been overridden somehow, but eventually the Slayer makes his way outside of the ducts and finds a codex entry for the command station itself. The entry explains that the station was built out of reinforced wraith steel to counter the assaults of the ironclad tribes during the Crimson Uprising, and levitates over the icy wastes like a gigantic Leviathan, serving as a symbol of Sentinel strength and as Commander Thera's coordination center. That's not bad world building, I don't think, but it might be best to keep it at maybe just one reference to something that happened before the game took place, otherwise it starts to read like a Wikipedia article, and the mystery of whatever a Crimson Rebellion is gets overwhelmed by other disconnected events and names. Anyway, it's starting to hit the fan here a bit. Sentinel soldiers are saying something massive is coming through a portal that just opened over the station, and Thera tells her subordinates to prepare the Slayer's dragon. In the next room, the Slayer sees that something massive is indeed attacking the station. A gigantic otherworldly limb has pierced through the roof, giving the entire area a bit of a decorative makeover, and after a bit of demon killing, the Slayer soon finds some of the culprits, more Argentian cultists conducting a summoning ritual within the station. Jerks. See, I hate when this happens. People quit at the place you're working, and instead of just leaving, they always make a scene. As the Slayer works his way around all the doors that keep getting locked in front of him, Sentinel soldiers over the radio are panicking that they're not able to reach Commander Valen or the King, without anyone seeming to realize yet that it's most likely the Creed Maker himself who's jamming all their stuff. This is called dramatic irony, by the way, when the readers or viewers of a story know things the characters don't, and I'm not really sure if it's being used badly or properly here. On the one hand, everybody knows that the Makers are not very nice, so if the game were to try and do a rug pull and say, whoa, the Creed Maker's actually a bad guy, it would of course fall completely flat, so it makes sense to reveal his plans to the player even if the Slayer and his friends don't know them yet. But on the other hand, it might cause a degree of frustration for the player, especially if you're like me and you hate being railroaded in a story, because you sort of just have to begrudgingly walk the Slayer right into the trap that you already know is set for him. Regardless, the Slayer continues navigating past all the disabled entryways of the facility and drops down into a control room to find a new weapon in a Sentinel airdrop. The Ravager, the Pulverizer's twin brother, whose codex entry explains that it was built in secret as an attempt to replicate the terrifying effectiveness of its counterpart. Just like the Pulverizer, the Ravager consumes demonic skulls of unnatural origin, but channels them into a much tighter cone of fire and shoots quicker the longer the Slayer holds down the trigger. I find it just as fun as the Pulverizer, but I don't know if I can call it any better. The larger spread of the Pulverizer Skull Crusher makes it very useful for crowd control, and it can be just as useful against larger opponents if you can get in close, while the Ravager, however, provides a consistent damage output within its effective range regardless of how close you are to your target. As the Slayer keeps moving through the besieged command station, he hears Thera say that it's not going to last much longer and that they need Sarat and him to provide air support, and after a particularly frustrating frustrating and claustrophobic fight with an Enforcer Pinky, the Slayer finds a yellow key that will grant him access to beyond all the locked doors. Taking an elevator shaft down to a lower level, he obtains another shield rune from an enchanted basin which causes a cannon built into his armor to fire on his targets whenever he deflects an attack. I don't know why you needed a magic rune for that, or what it has to do with the shield anyway, but it's pretty good. Disposing of the last group of pesky demons, the Slayer heads into the station hangar bay where his trusty pal Sarat is eagerly waiting for him. The pair fly outside and we get a much better look at the situation. Whatever is coming through that portal, it isn't a demon. Its massive tooth-ridden tentacles are strangling the entire station, and the Slayer's job out here is to destroy each one and close the hell portals, enabling the demonic invasion. The environment out here is pretty cool. Not as impressive as Aratum, I would say. It's pretty easy to tell the mountains are just part of the skybox, but it's lively and you can even see the Creedmaker's ship floating a safe distance away. As Sarat and the Slayer destroy each tentacle, they retract back upward into the portal, and when Sarat drops the Slayer off to take out the first hell portal on foot, he meets a very unique new enemy, a cacodemon hybrid. The codex entry for these things explains that they're ancient fragments of a vast hive mind, and their twisted thoughts feed the unknowable gods who reign over the suffocating lowlands. They're said to have once been members of the demonic hierarchy of hell, but were twisted even further by the whisperings of the witch, and now their eyeless gazes seek out wandering minds to consume so they may devour thought and memory to sustain their eternal communion with their malefic gods. Pretty gnarly codex entry, but unfortunately these things are a pain in the ass to fight, and not in a fun maraudery type way either. They do this thing where they put a shield up in front of themselves and shoot 3 big projectiles that can't be deflected, and there's no way to really damage them while they do it, you just have to wait until they're done. But worst of all, their melee attack is ridiculously long ranged, also can't be deflected, and does a ton of damage. Seriously, like 2 swipes from this thing is all it takes. Cool visual design, but geez, gameplay wise I miss the old cacodemons. With the destruction of the first hell portal and the third and final tentacle, the Slayer starts flying to the last hell portal, and along the way he meets the cacodemon's big brother, the giant cacodemon, a much less annoying but no less intimidating looking variant. Their codex entry explains that cacodemons of this eldritch variety are able to grow to enormous extents, and if they're given enough time they can swell to engulf entire worlds in their ravenous maws. Maybe one of them is what's coming through the portal. Yikes. With the destruction of the last Hellgate, the demonic invasion is stopped and the threat is neutralized, and whatever was coming through the portal decides it's had enough. A cutscene plays where we see that Thera had been guarding the Creedmaker this whole time, but just as she steps over to the window to get a closer look at the collapsing portal, a giant tentacle bursts back through again and grabs up the entire building she's in, bringing her and the Creedmaker into its own dimension. Sarat and the Slayer give chase, but the portal closes on them just before they can get inside, and the level abruptly ends. In one of the more jarring level transitions of the game, the story brings us to a secluded tower standing just barely above the churning waves of a boundless ocean, where the Slayer hops out of a Sentinel dropship to start killing demons. Judging by the architecture, I'm assuming we're still somewhere on Argent, but nobody says anything about the previous level, and Novik doesn't really seem to care that his daughter got kidnapped by a giant alien. For all we know, they're sending the Slayer here to pick up some donuts. Regardless, the Slayer gets to work, and in the fray he meets a new demonic species, the reptilian Komodo, an unusual animalistic creature that looks more like a wild beast as opposed to a demon, whose codex entry explains that they're the prized pets of Prince Azrak, having earned their place through brutal trials of combat and strike fear into Hell's enemies and denizens alike. A lot of people seem to have issues with this guy, but I mean, other than his above average health pool and his whiplashy tendency to play keep away, he's really not that bad at all. Few chain shots, few shells, some melees, and the Slayer can take care of him without a problem. By the way, for some reason there's a giant portal in the sky above the tower that bears a striking resemblance to the one that Commander Thera got taken through, so I guess that's why the Slayer's been sent here, but why is that portal here in the first place? Activating the tower's drainage systems and gaining access to its lower levels, the Slayer hears King Novik over his radio explaining that the church, which I'm assuming is like the Sentinel priesthood church, but also might be the Maker Church or something, are saying that there is an ancient deity here that will take the Slayer to Thera and that they trust no one but him to be able to carry out the mission. Alright, I hate to be that guy, but we're getting a little sloppy here with the narrative cohesion, but luckily Surratt returns to give us some airtime. And hopping onto his back, the Slayer hears Commander Valen explain further that this entire structure was built to maintain the deity's everlasting slumber, but now it's time to wake it up by deactivating each of the stasis emitters, keeping it asleep. Up in the sky, we can get a better look at what this place is exactly. Suspended in the center of a massive series of spillways is a gigantic organic structure resembling some sort of alien cocoon, which no doubt serves as the resting place of this mysterious deity. But we still don't know all the details. Flying through the drained lower levels of the island, Surratt and the Slayer pursue a hellship until they realize that the rocky caverns of the environment have suddenly shifted to organic tissue and massive bones. Ugh. It looks like this place was alive, or maybe even still is, and hopping off Surratt, the Slayer soon finds himself in a giant barnacle-encrusted galleon hanging from some support structures. All this had to have been built and used by the Argentians at one point, but why did they all leave, and why was this place forgotten? After some battles with a few hordes, the Slayer finally finds a codex entry for this place. It's called the Spire of Nerathul, and it resides within the northern seas of Estvovia, forged by a long-forgotten covenant between the Sentinels and the Wraiths to subdue a cosmic being of unknown origin. The method actually used to subdue it is lost to time, but legends speak of a weapon with destructive power beyond comprehension, and the slumbering titan is still said to reside here, awaiting the day of its awakening in its towering mythical cage. With the first stasis emitter deactivated by the Slayer's impeccable engineering skills, the vital signs of whatever is inside the giant cocoon begin to rise, and the Slayer hops on Surratt to head over to the next emitter. After a bit more flying and a few more battles, he arrives in a dilapidated cathedral where he sees a statue of— okay, it's Cthulhu. It's Cthulhu in the cocoon thing. Guys, listen, I watched True Detective Season 1, so I know a little bit about like H.P. Lovecraft and stuff. Doesn't Cthulhu kill you if you think about him or something? Alright, so I guess I have to do a bit of writing for the game here. I checked back to make sure I didn't miss anything, but since I've beaten the game at the point of writing this, I already know what happens, so I'll fill you all in. Okay, so these big portals obviously lead to the cosmic realm that's been built up for some time now. It's been mentioned in a few codex entries now, and is the place we know to be the witch's home dimension and all that. And the reason why we're doing all this roundabout Cthulhu shit is because ordinary humans like the Doomslayer can't enter into these portals. I guess the thinking is that if the Sentinels can make Cthulhu enter the portal, however, it will give the Slayer a chance to follow him inside. Now, why that portal is even here, I still don't know. After destroying the second stasis emitter and killing some giant cacos, Surratt and the Slayer head to the lowest level of the prison, where the Slayer hops off to grab another shield rune and disable the third stasis emitter. Cthulhu is now fully awakened, but still a bit groggy, and the Slayer is told to go retrieve the mythical weapon mentioned in the Spire Codex entry to set him free. Oh, great, so not only are we waking up Cthulhu, we're doing it very rudely, locating the weapon and using it to demolish the organic superstructure around Cthulhu's cage. The Slayer removes it from its stand, and it's here we obtain a codex entry that gives us its name. The weapon is called the BFC, Ballistic Force Crossbow, a weapon of cosmic might crafted by the Astral Forge Kings and bestowed to the Night Sentinels millennia ago to combat an unknown force of darkness. The weapon itself channels eldritch energies into its own inner workings and fires bolts that release cataclysmic destruction capable of piercing any defense in the known world. Okay, it's a way lamer BFG. Listen, I'm sorry if I'm sounding like a bit of a downer this level, but come on man, this is no BFG. It doesn't even do the little tendril thing that the 2016 and Eternal BFGs do. It just shoots a big green fart blast, really. It also inexplicably uses that iconic little beep sound effect of the other BFGs too. Which strikes me as really weird because why would a crossbow make a beep sound? I don't know, I am not feeling this one. Regardless, the Slayer jumps across to get closer to the cage and finds himself in a large pool of water for some reason where he hears Commander Valen wisely ask what happens if Cthulhu doesn't want to leave through the portal and, does Cthulhu stuff instead of just flying upward into a random portal. King Novik lazily says that this is their only way and the Slayer soon arrives inside the cage itself. Cthulhu is stirring slightly now, but he's still bound by hefty, mile-long chains that are gonna need some loosening. The Slayer begins climbing the towering spire and battles droves of demons along the way, engaging in a very fun Battle Knight encounter. I know I said it before, but these guys are just a blast. Any other enemy in this game in this tight of a space with these numbers would be a miserable nightmare, but Hell Knights have such a robust and simple combat loop. When I face like a Whiplash or an Arachnotron or a Cyber Demon, sometimes I do make pretzels out of my fingers trying to find the right gun, but with the Hell Knight anything works, just deflect and shoot, stupendous. Eventually reaching the top of the tower, the Slayer comes face to face with the I guess not almighty Cthulhu, who does not seem to have any kind of brain-scrambling gaze or the ability to turn oceans to dust or even the ability to break out of some dinky chains. This guy's not Cthulhu, he's his deadbeat cousin Kapupu. Even still, with his chains released, he does, according to plan, fly up into the heavens with the Slayer riding on his back. God damn, dude. Okay, that is pretty awesome. The Slayer riding on the back of Cthulhu into a space portal to rescue a princess is very Doom, and even if it makes no sense how we got here, it is a pretty dope way to end the level. We resume our adventure with the Slayer hopping off the Kapupu bus into what I guess he's decided is his stop, but suddenly he's transported to a fathomless void of liquid where a giant eyeball statue thing pulls him inside of it. Things are getting weird here, and after being spat out of the freaky water tubes, he finds himself in what looks to be some sort of elevator room where he ascends upward to finally arrive within the cosmic realm. Holy moly, this place is fittingly hard to describe. World-devouring alien krakens bellowing sanity-rending roars through the stars, scores beyond numbers of megalithic floating structures with exposed rotting innards, and the universe itself laid bare, its vastness continuing forever beyond what the Slayer's eyes can see and what his mind can comprehend. The scale is boundless, and one of my favorite little details is that the blue eyes jutting out of the organic growth of the environment actually follow the Slayer as he moves around. Creepy. There's just one tiny issue I have with this place, and it's the same one I kinda had with Hell. Again, it's very, very well made, but it's about as traditional an interpretation as you can go for when making a game location inspired by the Cthulhu mythos. Big alien squids, eyeballs all over the place, weird impossible architecture, the color green. If you've played the Skyrim Dragonborn DLC, I wouldn't blame you if you said you've already been here. Again, if you like Lovecraft stuff, you're gonna love it, but it's nothing really that new. The good news is, however, that it doesn't take the Slayer long to encounter an actually new hybrid demonic species, the Cosmic Baron, a hulking carapace-covered brute whose codex entry explains that it was born from the unholy cooperation between between Azric and the Witch, when Azric granted her Okrith synthesists the genetic information of his most powerful demons. These guys are the Barons of Hell from previous installments given a Lovecraftian makeover, and I'm happy to say they do not suffer from the same effect the environment does. The Cosmic Barons are unique in that they resemble some kind of bizarre starfish mollusk amalgamation, a very refreshing departure from the usual tentacle squid design route. Their gameplay is also very enjoyable since they're basically just bigger, stronger, faster battle knights and offer the same aggressive combat systems that they do to a more formidable extent. Now, to some of you that may rightfully sound kind of lame, which is a fair standpoint, but actually now that I think about it, the Barons of Hell have been basically just bigger copy-pasted Hell Knights since the start of the modern Doom trilogy back in 2016, so this is what I was expecting, and the Battle Knights are already really fun, which means the Cosmic Barons are too. Anyway, we've got no time to waste. The Slayer's got a princess to save, and as he travels through his surreal surroundings, he hears the otherworldly voice of the Witch echoing through the expanse, proclaiming that the Old One has returned and woe awaits for all who would oppose him. I guess she's talking about Kapupu, who must be her god that she's been working so hard to return, but isn't she way more powerful than he is? Maybe the reason for his patheticness on Argent is because he was outside of his homeworld, and now that he's back in his realm, he's gonna give us some reason why he's the big dog around here. Unperturbed by the Witch's ramblings, the Slayer keeps moving and soon meets another new enemy, the Acolyte, a weedy, unsightly sorcerer whose codex entry explains that they were once hallowed sentinel priests of Argent, but when their minds were poisoned by the Witch's profane touch, they melded into one, each serving as part of a many-headed serpent sent to defile the worlds they had previously sworn to protect. I'd describe his gameplay patterns for you, but I killed the dude so fast I didn't even get a chance to see what he does, so he can't be that interesting. Alright, again, I'm gonna have to kinda spoil something real quick here. I'm disappointed to say that this guy, the Acolyte, and the Cosmic Baron are the only two enemies that the Cosmic Realm has to offer. That isn't a joke. Out of an entirely new setting with limitless potential for new enemies, we get a reskin and some fodder. That is not a lot, and looking at the concept art for the game, there seems to have been plans to include some more new enemies, or maybe even just give a few of the old demons some eldritch makeovers, but we didn't get any of this stuff. Listen, I'll admit it, I'm not really the biggest cosmic eldritch whatever fan, especially since I watched True Detective Season 1, and that is mathematically the best usage of that genre of horror in existence, so nothing else has or will ever come close. But again, you can get really creative with this stuff as the concept art shows, but I guess they ran out of time or just didn't care. Either way, two enemies is a glaring missed opportunity. Around the corner, however, the Slayer finds a codex entry for this place that explains it's called the City of Riul, a nightmarish world of bizarre geometry, unknown titanic beings, and blackened seas, although it's whispered by some Argentian scholars that their ancient gods, the Wraiths, actually originated from here. Even though there's no new enemies in this place, we do get a new weapon, sort of, the Dread Mace, which like the Flail and Power Gauntlet can be used as a melee weapon, and its gimmick is that it deals a massive amount of damage at the cost of only having one charge, so you can use it to take out most demons in a single hit, but you have to wait a while before you can use it again. Honestly, I don't really like it that much. I mean, if you fully upgrade it, you can get an additional usage if you meet some certain requirements during combat, but if you use this thing, you're basically out of a melee attack. To me, the Dread Mace is sort of just a rechargeable, much less useful BFG that only takes out one enemy. You also can't like switch to it, so if you're using the Power Gauntlet and you see a Komodo come in and you think, ooh, I can use the Dread Mace on this guy, if you switch off from the Power Gauntlet to your Dread Mace, you lose all your melee usages, which I learned the hard way. In the next arena, another Acolyte shows up with some friends, so now I can actually explain what they do, I guess. But it isn't much. They teleport around, do a kind of meteor shower attack that never hits me, and they can put up a force field, but other than that, they're basically just way weaker revenants. Pressing forward as he's solving what I admittedly think are some actually pretty fun puzzles, the Slayer hears again the rumbling voice of the witch, announcing to her worshippers that their covenant with the Dark Realm is sealed and its strength is now their own. Eventually, the Slayer makes it out of the weird monolithic living structure. Yeah, I think we were actually inside one of those floating pillar things, pretty neat, and we find ourselves back within the reaches of the Cosmic Realm's expanse from another angle. You'll notice here that you can see giant tentacles emerging from the void without any apparent source. It's almost as if they're biological extensions of the Cosmic Realm itself, which is really cool and once again adds to the otherworldly scale of this place, and the fact that you can't even see what they're attached to also adds to that Lovecraftian sense of the laws of reality not really seeming to work properly around here. I've heard it said in the community that the Cosmic Realm actually looks as though it's sickly and withered, which I guess I can understand where they're coming from, but I'm not really sure. I mean, this is kind of the genre standard of what all Lovecraft-inspired locations look like, so I would assume the filthy, faded look is just the usual visual shorthand for, hey, you're in space hell. By the way, something I forgot to mention earlier are these things called Wraith Stones that the Slayer can sometimes find held by ornate golden monuments depicting what appears to be an ancient wraith. They're the final upgrade currency for weapons, and although they're very rare, they unlock the most useful abilities of the Slayer's arsenal, so it's always best to keep an eye out for them. After another big arena battle, the Slayer enters a portal that will apparently take him closer to where Commander Thera's signal is coming from, and he arrives in an environment I find quite a bit more interesting. Otherworldly overgrown fungi crowning bizarre rock formations, enormous cocoon-looking objects that almost look as if gravity is reversed on them, and those structures off in the distance actually look like primitive houses to me. When I unlocked the camera to go over there and get a better look, I found this. Now we're getting somewhere. This is some weird stuff. To progress, the Slayer has to yank out these emerald artifacts from a couple of magic tentacle orbs to activate an elevator, and after grabbing the first one, he then engages in a very unusual combat encounter where he's forced to leave his shield in one of the blue power switch things and fight a group of demons with only his fists and weapons. The thing is, if he ever takes the shield out of the switch, the demons will despawn, which is annoying not only because it's freaking hard to fight without the shield. I'm so used to having it and using it all the time, I accidentally kept calling it back more times than I could count. His reward for completing this little encounter, however, is a codex entry fittingly written for the witch herself. Finally, some info on this lady. The entry explains that Ulsamir the Witch was born from the congealed madness of the Cosmic Realm and serves as a living conduit for the dark magic of her dimension. Her current body is simply a vessel for her essence, and although she's temporarily allied with Azric and the forces of hell, her ultimate loyalty remains with her own god, whose return she has sought as a means to fulfill her higher inscrutable purpose that no mortal mind could comprehend. I think she's kinda interesting, and there's been hints throughout the game that she's definitely got her own sorts of plans, so I wonder if she's gonna try to usurp Azric or something down the line. By the way, if you've ever wondered if she's actually modeled underneath her veil, she is, and her face looks like this. Ugh. She is also modeled underneath her clothing as well. Fully and accurately modeled. Stepping out of the cavern, the Slayer hears the witch's sweeping voice again, exclaiming to her minions that the time for ascension is now, and soon they will no longer be shackled to a dying cosmos. So I guess this place really isn't supposed to look like this, and most of the time it's actually maintained pretty well by Eldritch janitorial services. There's also a lot of tentacles here too, which makes sense since their codex entry explains that the Cosmic Realm is where they come from. I gotta say as well that the Cosmic Realm has to have some of the best puzzles in the whole game. They're all suitably perplexing and unnatural, and many of them are out of the way and just reward you with secrets or rubies and the like, so they're not obstructive either. Now during the battle for the other orb relic, I encountered another acolyte and actually realized that they do have this thing they do sometimes where they summon a copy of themselves that you need to kill first before you can actually take them out properly. That's a pretty cool mechanic, I think, but I'm not sure what to say about the fact I needed to get to the 4th encounter with them before even noticing it. Regardless, with the 2 halves of the artifact in his possession, the Slayer can now access the central lift, and on the way down he hears the witch spout even more Lovecraft nonsense about the stars bleeding and the void calling. At the bottom of the city, the Slayer uses some sort of apparatus to combine the 2 halves of the artifact, and it's here we learn it's actually a key, and once the Slayer battles through one last horde of demons and a couple evil squid wizards, he uses it to activate a portal which he then steps through to end the level. Our adventure continues with the Slayer having found himself on the precipice of a limitless sea, with the wreckages of age-old ships halfway submerged in the water, an imposing tower piercing the clouds, a massive prying eye watching the entire domain, and an atmosphere bathed in a slightly more refreshing purple color as opposed to the usual green. Again, it's more Lovecraft, and while I think it looks good, it's not winning any points for originality. Busted old boats, a big ocean, floating shit everywhere, nothing I haven't seen before. Anyway, there's actually not much to do here in this first section besides grabbing a ruby and killing a few hordes, but when the Slayer takes a teleporter, he's actually transported to underneath the waves themselves. Now this is interesting. Even though this game doesn't have any underwater combat, this is still a pretty cool little section, and looking down into the pitch blackness demonstrates really well the depth of the cosmic seas and once again adds to the scale. Inside one of the ships, the Slayer finds a codex entry for this place that explains it's called the Temple of Lomarith, and the entry explains that the surrounding area is a resting place for the abandoned vessels of countless sailors from epochs across all of time itself. Some were explorers seeking answers within the cosmic realm, while others were basic travelers swallowed whole by dimensional rifts, but even still, all of them shared the same fate, being consumed by the madness of the realm, leaving their stories behind amongst the scattered debris. After a brisk swim, the Slayer is teleported back to dry land, where he keeps moving and eventually comes across the lifeless body of a giant Kako. Yikes, pretty crazy to see how big these things are up close. In the next area, the Slayer battles in what was for me probably the most difficult fight of the game so far, an army of demons from vagaries to arachnotrons to hell knights to cacodemons and so on, all need to be taken out before the Pinky leader can be defeated, and it's mayhem. A lot of the enemies are respawning too, so like if you kill an arachnotron, it'll only buy you some time before another one spawns in again. I find it's best to just wipe out as many demons as you can and then bum rush the Pinky when his shields are down. Eventually, however, the Slayer is victorious, and after solving a quick puzzle, he activates another portal to take him closer to Thera's signal. When he's transported, he finds himself in a different area encircled by towering thunderous waves. Okay, getting better here. Are we inside of a tsunami or something? That's an awesome set piece idea, and you can even see giant tentacles in the water too. Crazy. This place is another free roam area with lots of secrets and extra stuff for the Slayer to find too, but once he wraps up with all that, there's a pretty cool little section where he jumps from floating shipwreckage to floating shipwreckage to get to another portal, where he is transported back to the depths of the cosmic ocean. While he's swimming inside a sunken ship, however, chunks of the wreckage are torn away by some unseen force. Something else, something probably very big, seems to be in here with us, but before we can see what it is, the Slayer arrives at the teleporter that takes him to the temple. Here he engages in another tricky battle where he has to contend with 2 vagaries at once. No leaders or enforcers or anything, but geez, make sure you keep your distance and you have rockets and spikes, otherwise you'll be fighting these 2 for 15 minutes. Fortunately, Commander Thera's signal is now stronger than ever. She's inside the temple itself, and as the Slayer makes his way to the entrance, he hears the witch's voice again telling her followers to make ready the sacrifice before the beast can stop them. A cutscene then plays where the hand of Kapupu himself rises from the impossible pool of water the Slayer is standing on, hoists him up, and drops him into his mouth. Luckily, Kapupu doesn't chew his food very thoroughly, it seems, and the Slayer simply directly lands at the bottom of his esophagus to start looking for a way out. Maybe it was him that was underwater with us, and looking around at this place, I'm surprised to say it's actually pretty well lit and stable. You'd think with every movement Kapupu makes, the Slayer would be sent flying due to physics and gravity, but I guess he's politely chosen to remain completely still and upright so the Slayer can kill him. Listen to me complaining about killing demons inside the stomach of Cthulhu. I can definitely give points for originality here. It's not bad. It's another free roam area where the Slayer's main objective is to take out Cthulhu's, I guess that's his heart, by punching these green organ things really hard. I would describe the environment here, but there's not much I can say besides it's disgusting, and to lament the fact that they definitely didn't even try to make it seem like the innards of an actual living thing. It's clearly just a video game terrain, which, you know, isn't that big of a deal, but it's kind of a shame to me because they probably could have gotten pretty creative with like orientations. Maybe you could have the level suddenly switch to its side as Cthulhu moves around, or you could have like low gravity sections when Cthulhu is flying, I don't know, but unfortunately the environment doesn't have any effect on gameplay whatsoever aside from some stupid poison pools that nobody asked for. Regardless, after a few battles, the Slayer comes upon a codex entry for Commander Thera. The codex entry placements make no sense in this game, but anyway, the entry is actually pretty short and doesn't really tell us anything we don't already know. Thera is the heir to the throne, Novik's only child, dead queen mom, etc., and she's also a magic space general witch. With the destruction of the third and final green organ thing, Kapupu's heart is now exposed and the Slayer uses the BFC on it, which causes Kapupu to projectile vomit all over the place and eventually keel over and die. Yeah, he's dead, and the Slayer escapes his insides right back outside where he was when Kapupu first grabbed him? Wait, so in all that time when he swallowed the Slayer, he only moved like 3 feet? What a disappointment. The witch is equally upset as the Slayer hears her wailing voice about the old one being lost forever, but after dealing with some more demons and another Agadon hunter, the Slayer's right back where he was 15 minutes ago, with Kapupu's body meekly resting beside the temple. Approaching the temple's empty doorway, a cutscene plays where the Slayer walks up a ridiculously long flight of stairs to arrive at the final boss room, where we see that Thera is apparently being held in some kind of trance. After one last tough battle with a variety of heavy demons, the unstoppable Slayer makes it to Thera, and a cutscene plays where I'm just gonna let the shit play out.
The Sentinels know so little about themselves. She has the spirit of an ancient Sentinel god within her, a wraith who are descendants of this realm. Here, her energy becomes fully realized. And it can be harnessed. We should kill him. We'll need something more permanent. Etrigos, Zarath, Mazike.
We resume back on Argent where King Novik is discussing with Commander Valen the situation surrounding the Slayer and Thera when the Creed Maker suddenly sends them a message saying that there's been a problem and they should go. Just then, a demonic portal opens up in the room, and after tossing the broken helmet of the Slayer through it, the newly empowered Azric steps out to start causing some serious trouble. The scene then cuts to the Slayer, who awakens trapped inside of a small magic containment chamber being sustained by 3 Kapupus? Oh my god, I'm not even gonna try anymore. Alright, so the Slayer's trapped, and after testing out his shield saw on the wall and seeing he's gonna have to try something else, he reaches towards the tether lock in his armor, remembering how when he tried to remove it last time, it overloaded his entire containment cell on the Creedmaker's ship. Even though it definitely causes him some degree of discomfort, the Slayer strains against the lock and eventually manages to tear it out of his armor, causing a massive energy release that simultaneously kills all 3 of the Kapupus, which disables the containment field thing but also causes the platform he's standing on to plunge downward into some kind of giant cosmic poison pool. As the Slayer sinks, the screen fades to black and we hear his heartbeat slowly fade until he dies. King Novik's voice is then heard reciting the Rip and Tear incantation, and the Slayer's sigil forms on the screen before he awakens once more, although this time in what looks to be a pile of corpses in a dungeon somewhere. An attendant comes over to say hello, and after greeting him, the Slayer reaches down to grab his shotgun, only for the camera to pan up and reveal that he is still dead. Okay. Before we continue, there is obviously much to discuss with that temple cutscene. Once again, another instance of cutscene Slayer not quite fully lining up with gameplay Slayer, and not to mention, what exactly even happened? Okay, let me try and walk us through it. So first, Slayer walks up to Thera, alright? Thera is clearly incapacitated or something, obviously not like fully awake, so he grabs her arm to try and yank her out of whatever's holding her, which I can't tell if he does it so slowly because he's trying to be cautious or if he's got a crush on her and he's nervous. But regardless, when he grabs her, the soul of the last Wraith emerges from inside Thera's body and just one-taps him. With the Slayer now completely immobilized, Azric, the fatty Creed Maker, and the Witch just show up out of nowhere. Azric gets a cheap shot in, and then the Witch starts getting to work on conducting the ritual to remove the Wraith's soul from Thera's body back into the heart of Argent. Mind you, the Wraith soul, who effortlessly leveled the Slayer for so much as touching Thera and is clearly capable of defending itself, is watching all of this go down and never once thinks to retaliate against the quite clearly evil people getting ready to kill the f*** out of it. And bing bang boom, the Witch casts the Wraith's stupid soul out of Thera's body back into the heart of Argent into Azric, and then the cutscene ends. Like, the logistics of it are hilarious when you think about it. The fatty Creed Maker, the Witch, and Azric were all literally hiding from behind a wall somewhere, just watching everything unfold, and they just walk over. Yeah, how did they even know it would play out like this? How did they know the Wraith soul would attack the Slayer for no reason? How did they know it would one-tap him? And what is going on with Thera herself? Listen, I could go into all the different ways this cutscene could have been handled better, but this video is getting really freaking long now and school is around the corner, so I'll just nutshell it by saying that it literally plays out almost beat for beat the exact same way that one scene from the Doodle Bob episode where SpongeBob and Patrick prank Squidward does. I even made another storyboard thing to show this, but with gameplay accurate Slayer instead.
He's going to the door.
He's knocking on the door. Squidward's answering the door, and...
You see what I'm getting at? Anyway, we're running out of time here. I'll hopefully revisit that discussion in some other video. Alright, so the Doomslayer is dead, and because heaven and hell work a little differently in the Doom universe than their real-world counterparts are said to, even though I would argue he seems like a pretty decent guy, and I doubt he deserved to be sent here, he has still found himself within hell and must now find a way to return to the mortal plane. Within the room he's awoken in, the Slayer finds the game's only power-up, Berserker, which upon using drastically improves his damage output, grants him infinite melee attacks, and even gives him a small bit of automatic health regeneration. It's pretty cool, and after using it to eviscerate a few waves of demons, he finds a way out of the dungeon by flooding it with blood, which he then must swim through to ascend to the surface. And I gotta say, when I first played, I fully expected to walk out into another generic orange hellscape, but I'm happy to see things are quite a bit different here. This place looks to be some kind of port with a massive hellish vessel floating on the docks, jagged paradoxical rock formations hanging over the landscape, lost souls wandering aimlessly towards their fates, and some sort of tower or fortress in its center. Very nice, glad to see an environment in the hell setting that isn't just something like the torture pits or the evil lair. This place actually seems to serve a purpose of some kind, acting as a junction into the dark realm itself. And of course, the ever-stoic Slayer silently gets to work, and I gotta say, even though I do not understand the circumstances that led up to him dying, and I do not believe his death was rightfully earned by the antagonist, the Slayer dying and immediately going back to killing demons in hell as if nothing has happened is very much in line with his character. To him, this is probably just a minor inconvenience. And as the first battle of the level demonstrates, him being a zombie also doesn't affect his gameplay at all either. He can still do everything perfectly fine, and something I found interesting is that there's actually acolytes down here in hell now too. After dealing with the horde in the courtyard, the Slayer enters the fortress, where after a really fun fight with two empowered whiplashes that don't have any wiggle room, so they're just stuck in the corner while you get to stunlock them, he finds a codex entry for this place that explains it's called the Harbor of Souls. It is here where the wicked and unfortunate alike are ordained by their sins and channeled through the river of the underworld to their destined lair of its darkest depths. Even though the outside environment is pretty cool, I can't really award any points for originality inside of the fortress here. It's really just another basic torture dungeon with nothing interesting of note. But after grabbing a blue skull key and battling a cosmic baron, the Slayer gains access to the fortress lift, which takes him to a higher level where we get to see some more cool vistas. Again, I'm really happy to see a different kind of environment for the Doom Hell setting. You don't need crucified bodies everywhere or exploding volcanoes for the environment to feel foreboding and infernal, and it's good to see it at least given a fresh coat of paint. After another fun berserker battle and a few more combat encounters, the Slayer obtains the Red Skull key, which he then uses to gain access to the harbor docks. A pretty funny cutscene then plays where the Slayer approaches the boat, but his path is blocked by the Hell Priest ferryman who demands payment, so the Slayer obliges. You know, I wish there were more scenes like this one in the Dark Ages. They used to be all over the place in 2016 and Eternal, and they were tremendous. I always like seeing little tidbits of the Slayer's simple and fun character, but really this is like the only one of this kind in the entire game. Regardless, the Slayer has arrived at the Hell Ferry, and I think I'm starting to see what his plan is. Rather than taking the boat into hell with the rest of the poor souls, he's just gonna steer it right back up the river into the mortal world again. The design of the boat is pretty sick too. Its bridge is a giant horned skull, and it's so huge it looks like it goes on for miles. It's moving too. As the Slayer fights on it, the wreckages of other ships can be seen slowly being passed in the accursed waters. After a few battles, the Slayer finds another codex entry within the ship for Hell Priests, and the entry explains that Hell Priests are unique beings that are neither flesh nor spirit and serve as the High Council of Hell's living conduits for evil. Ancient Belias, or Belias, I don't know, is the eldest amongst their ranks, having witnessed many of Hell's empires rise and crumble, and now he observes the campaign of Prince Azrek along with the rest of his profane stewards, recording each of Azrek's victories and failures for the Council's merciless judgment. Taking a lift to reach the ferry's bridge, another cutscene plays where the Slayer takes the helm and makes a small detour, ramming full speed ahead into the gateway between Hell and the world of the living, before smashing right through the doors and being enveloped in golden light. We continue our tale an indeterminate amount of time later, with the Slayer awakening once more in an unfamiliar environment. A murky forest with a river of blood serving as his only guide. The Slayer follows the path that's set for him until he comes upon its source, his sigil floating ominously in the fog as a cacophony of chanting is heard emanating from all around it. Approaching the sigil, a cutscene plays where we are taken to a secluded forest on Argent in which a group of Argentians overseen by Commander Valen are conducting a dark ritual to bring the Slayer back to life, using Hell's own power to do so. Eventually, the ritual works and the Slayer is returned to the mortal plane. Even though he seems a little miffed about the method the Argentians used to bring him back, I guess he figures they must be getting desperate, so he takes his repaired helmet from Commander Valen and the third to last level begins. Again though, right here at the beginning, it does that Ancestral Forge thing where after the cutscene, all the people who were just here a second ago just vanished, like no Valen or Sentinel priests, so that's pretty weird. Anyway, we're back on Argent, and over his radio, the Slayer hears Sentinel soldiers saying that the Creed Maker has surrendered and he isn't responding. Alright, so I've actually just realized only now something I would have mentioned earlier, but I didn't think to because there was literally only one single line to convey it in a cutscene I narrated over. Basically, this might not come as a shock to some of you, but the Creed Maker is actually acting on orders from the Maker Interior Ministry itself. This whole time I was thinking that he was just caught between a rock and a hard place and only allied with Azric in a last-ditch effort to save his own buttery ass, but that's not the case. In the one cutscene where he kills the drone that Azric was controlling, he tells his lieutenant to contact their superiors, and all the subtext in his action afterwards clearly indicates that they gave him the go-ahead to backstab the Argentians and just play dumb. See, the whole game there's been this, what I think is pretty interesting side conflict with the Creed Maker and the Slayer. It doesn't take long for the Makers to learn that the Slayer is very, very powerful, and they did give him a lot of reasons to not really like them. So when he keeps breaking out of his mind control whatever, the Creed Maker realizes that instead of being useful, the Slayer is now a serious problem, and it might not have been a great idea to give the extremely angry man the god-killing powers. Azric also realized this and discussed the situation with him in the cutscene, and as we obviously know now, the Creed sided with him on orders from the Ministry, because if you know anything about the Makers, it's that they don't actually care at all about humans and only see them as fuel. That's why the Creed says in the temple cutscene that they should just kill him, but Azric says doing that will only slow him down, which as we know is true. I wish I could explain it more, and I'm sure I didn't do a good job explaining it anyway, but there's a lot of stuff at play here that nobody would know about unless they've played the previous games or paid really, really close attention to a lot of not very well delivered subtext. And again, school 2.5 hour long video, we gotta keep it moving. Alright, so we're back on Argent in the eyes of the Slayer for another non-linear free roam level. If you look up, you can actually see the Sentinel Barracks way up in the mountains, so we're actually currently in the valleys below we saw on fire back in that level, and I guess they're on fire again. The Slayer's job here is to take out 3 siege towers that are causing some trouble, and as I said, it's another non-linear level with no new enemies or anything else really of note. Within the valley, however, the Slayer finds a codex entry for the city of Elderax, which I guess is this crappy little village down here in the valley the Slayer currently finds himself in. The entry explains that the castle of Elderax stands resilient with ancient walls made from aether stones, ironclad tribe, Zyvorian conclave. Okay guys, I'm really starting to get annoyed now. It is way too late to be doing world building stuff. That's over now. Can you please explain this shit with like Thera's Wraith, or maybe give us some more info on what's happened since the Slayer's been dead? Or maybe explain the 3 Kapupus and whatever's going on with him. I'm not really interested in Zyvorian aether stones or whatever. The story's kind of going off the rails right now, and there are a lot of holes to plug in the remaining 3 levels. After destroying the siege towers, the Slayer gets picked up by the homie Sarat, who flies him up to the Creed Maker's ship so he can give him his just desserts. It's nice to be back on the back of Sarat again. I've missed him since the Spire mission, and now that I think about it, why didn't he come with the Slayer through the portal? Whatever. When the Slayer gets to the Creed ship, however, it actually starts firing on him and Sarat, so it looks like they aren't going to try and pull any mind games on him. They know what's coming. Sarat drops the Slayer off at the front door, and when he turns around, the Slayer finds another codex entry, this time for Commander Valen. Okay, again, a little late for character development, but I'll read this one. Commander Valen stands as the last of an elite order, his name etched in Sentinel history, although the horrors he's seen in his years of waging war against the enemies of Argent weigh heavy on him, and his greatest battle lies within now in his attempts to prevent his son from walking the same bloody path he walks. His son? Is his son that random guy in the ritual cutscene I thought was just some Sentinel warrior? Okay, great. Can't wait to see the moving character arc Valen is gonna have in the 2.5 levels that are left in the game. Alright, anyway, now we're inside the Maker's ship, and I think it's time to discuss something I've been waiting to do for a while now. So as we've explored each environment this game's offered, I've commented on things like architecture and set pieces, and while I think there have been some pretty cool ones, and I've praised things like scale and detail, which can both go a long way in making them interesting, really all of the game's environments, with maybe the exception of the Ancestral Forge, actually have that problem I mentioned with the cosmic realm and hell, and that they're not really anything we haven't seen before. Even though I like the environments, it would be pretty fair to describe the Harbor of Souls as just blue water hell, Aratum as Asgard but not in space, and I even said the cosmic realm is just that one Lovecraft area from Skyrim. But there is one setting that's been established in the Doom universe that I can confidently say defies that kind of categorization, although it's never made an appearance yet in the Dark Ages and unfortunately never will. It's called Urdak, the homeworld of the Maker race, and it only shows up in Doom Eternal and its DLCs, and concerning only its visual design, I cannot say that I have seen anything like Urdak before. It's some kind of angel, robot, alien, heaven, hell, nightmare, dream dimension. It was something completely new, not space Rome or space hell, but instead space heaven, if you want to be really reductive, but even still, I've never seen space heaven before. I was really looking forward to either seeing more of it or something like it in Doom the Dark Ages, but all we get is this tiny little section on the Creedmaker's ship. That's a crying shame. The developers had a great opportunity to explore a cool original setting like Urdak some more, or better yet, tap into the infinite creativity of the human mind and their AAA coffers of gold cash money to create something new again, but they didn't. Instead, we got some well-made okay stuff and Space Church for the billionth time. Dude, I bit my tongue during the Sentinel Barracks and Aratum missions, but oh my god, I have been inside video game church now more times than I've been in actual real-life church. Yes, churches can be cool, and the Argentian people have been established to be very religious, and I think I even said at one point like the big cathedral in the middle of Aratum is pretty sick. I'm okay with them just being set pieces, but holy shit, being inside a church in a game is so boring now, dude. They've been overdone so much to the point where to me they're about as interesting as like factories now. Please think of some new setting ideas besides fucking church in your video games, developers. They have lost all their novelty as interior environments, and there are so many other mystical and grand environments you could be making instead. Regardless, we're inside the Creedmaker's ship now, and it is pretty dope. Everything has this sense of alien piousness to it, and it's gratifying to tear apart every stupid little drone mindlessly throwing themselves in a futile attempt to stop the Slayer. But it doesn't take long for the Slayer to arrive at this weird blue wall that I don't remember being here in my first playthrough, that has no objective marker or indicator to tell you that you're supposed to shoot it to progress. Why is this random blue wall here? In all the walkthroughs on YouTube, it's not there. Did they add this in an update? Okay, after getting around the blue wall, the Slayer catches up to the fatty Maker, and after a quick little cutscene where he fruitlessly begs Azric to help him, it's on. The Creedmaker's a pretty basic boss, holds his own actually pretty well against the Slayer, and even confirms my earlier theory that he was acting on orders from the Ministry by saying that he only ever did what was asked of him. He shoots electric tennis balls and is actually pretty quick for a fat guy, and overall I don't really mind his boss fight. It's unique enough, I guess. I don't think I've ever seen a boss in a game who fought using the in-universe equivalent of a mart cart. Eventually, however, the Slayer gets the upper hand and punches the Creed through a large window down to a lower level where his second phase begins. It's here where the fatty Creed Creed Maker shows us his true form, and it's revealed that he's not a fatty Creed Maker, he's a weird worm body maker. Ugh. That's an interesting design, I suppose, and continues the tradition of the Makers being pretty monstrous and actually kind of demonic underneath their saintly metallic bodies. Looking at his concept art, thank God they didn't go with this awful giant baby face design. Yikes, that does not look good. Not only is that just a garbage design, it doesn't look makery or alien at all. Scary to see that's what the Creed could have been. I definitely prefer the one we got to that. Anyway, the second phase ups the ante quite a bit. The Creed starts shooting quicker projectiles at a much higher frequency, and he has this annoying laser wall thing that you have to wait until he puts down before you can hurt him again. But as always, the Slayer is victorious, although as he's dealing the final death blow and ignoring the Creed's groveling for mercy, he stops when he hears the Creed mention Thera's name. All while King Novik and the Sentinels are listening through the Slayer's radio, the fatty Creed Maker says that Thera is still alive and being kept on board Azric's ship. He tells the Slayer that if she dies, then Azric would lose his power and the Creed will take him to her if he lets him live. The Slayer considers the fatty Creed Maker's offer, then he responds by killing him really hard until he is dead, and then he dies. Our journey is nearing its end, and we resume elsewhere on Argent within Azric's flagship, where we see Thera's power is being harnessed by Azric to empower his demonic horde. Okay, so Thera is still alive. What the hell was the point of all that Heart of Argent shit if Thera was all you needed to... Is he drawing power from the Heart of Argent or just Thera? And if the Wraith Soul is no longer inside of Thera now since it got blasted out of her, what the hell is so special about her now? The scene then cuts to a battle on the ground where random Argentian citizens are fighting against the demons? What the has it been that long since the Slayer's been dead that all the actual Night Sentinels are gone now? They need random people to join the fight. Oh great, there's a supposedly elite warrior marauder being carted off on a stretcher by two random dudes. Nice job throwing out all your characterization from the previous games for no reason. I guess they're chumps now. Ugh. The scene then cuts again to inside an Atlan hangar bay where in an admittedly kind of funny scene we see the Slayer patiently waiting for his Atlan to be fixed, but the Argentian scientists say that the demonic horde is getting too close and it won't be ready in time. King Novik then courteously offers his personal royal Atlan to the Slayer, who gratefully accepts the gesture. Well, I guess that's kind of an arc for Novik, going from not trusting the Slayer at all and treating him like an outsider to giving him his own Atlan. I don't know. Anyway, we're back in an Atlan now. Geez, it's been a while, hasn't it? Novik's Atlan is not especially different from the other ones. It's unique, however, in that it has a pair of giant cannons on its shoulders that can be used to one-shot a Titan if you can fully charge up the power meter. Again though, after the cutscene, King Novik's Atlan is actually here, which is good. I like that it doesn't just vanish into thin air, but he just stands here with his dukes up. Would have been pretty sick to maybe fight alongside him, but no. Regardless, I'm not really sure where exactly we are on Argent at the moment, but the Slayer's job here is to take out the Hellgate generators and then go kill Azric. Now, the only real issue I have with Atlan gameplay actually is that, and this is a problem with a lot of games that I guess I can't really fault Doom that much for, but when you dodge an attack, you're not really dodging it. In reality, when you press the dodge button, you actually become temporarily invincible for a split second, which is why you can see attacks here just sort of go right through the Atlan. It's not a big deal at all, and I understand why it has to be like that, but just once I'd like to see a game that actually has dodging be dodging instead of the invincibility thing. Like you actually duck under attacks or like twist your body to the side. I don't know, the invincibility thing just never sits right with me. I always hate having to dodge through attacks, but I digress. It doesn't take long for the Slayer to take out the generators. There aren't any new Titan variants here to deal with, and soon the Sentinels even drop down an Atlan chain gun for him. You know, now that I think about it, one of the strangest things to me about the Attlans in this game are their lack of melee weapons. The fists are great and make enough sense, but in Doom Eternal they had spears, and there's concept art of them with axes, and checking through the game files I even found an Atlan chainsaw. Shame none of that stuff ever made it in. Anyway, after getting to use the chain gun for all of 5 seconds, the Slayer hears over his radio that the Horde is thinning and jumps into a pit to meet Azric's ship head on. A cutscene then plays where we see Azric on the bow of his ship, stronger than ever, concentrating his power to— oh my gosh, look who's back. It's Kapupu, or at least one of the Kapupu quintuplets, given some admittedly pretty gnarly cyber demonic upgrades, and he's looking to get some payback. Once again, however, this guy is just a total pushover. I have no idea why he's the witch's god. If they said these things were just like the cosmic realm equivalent of the demonic titans, then all this would be fine. But instead, Kapupu is treated as some sort of insanely powerful being that they had to make a giant prison for, and he's worshipped by the witch and everything, and the guy just dies every time he shows up. As always, the Slayer is victorious over Kapupu and hops out of Novik's Atlan to call Azric down for a good old-fashioned brawl, man to man.
Are the only one they fear.
And with that, for the first time, we finally face Azric not as cutscene Slayer, but as gameplay Slayer. And even though it feels good to smash this dude's face in, Azric is no joke. He's big, fast, and he hits hard, but almost all of his attacks are blockable. So really, the whole fight serves as a test for your deflection skills. However, his animations can be a little wonky if you ask me. He doesn't always move especially fluidly, like not all of his attacks flow into the next. Sometimes he sort of starts a swing and then pauses, and then it comes out in like an instant. I don't know, it's a little weird, but nothing too ridiculous. Yeah, he doesn't have any dumb gimmicks. He doesn't regenerate health. He doesn't go invincible or anything. The only real issue I have with him is this stupid frame 1 AoE thing he does sometimes when you get too close. How am I supposed to avoid that? Yeah, regardless, when the Slayer deals enough damage to him, Azric realizes that he's not in a cutscene anymore, so the stakes are much higher, and transforms into his enhanced form. His design here is pretty interesting. Looks to be sort of a mix of demonic and angelic features actually, with the eyes and whatnot. In his second phase, he gets a few new moves, becomes quicker, and he's harder to stagger. Now, while I would normally recommend the chain shot for strong, large enemies with high health pools, in Azric's case, I actually find the impaler to be much more useful since he likes to dodge, and the chain shot can be pretty hard to use on mobile targets. However, it doesn't take long for the Slayer to kill the shit out of Azric, and after dealing the final blow, oh boy, we're back in a cutscene. What's going on here? Killed my space dragon. God damn it. I don't know if there's anything I hate more than when you're kicking a boss's ass in a fight and then a cutscene plays where all of a sudden they just kill you or some shit. Like, what the fuck? I was winning. Again, there is a huge disconnect between cutscene Slayer and gameplay Slayer. If Azric did some purposefully undodgeable attack when his health got to 0 or something, and then you had Surratt show up to save the Slayer in a cutscene, then not only would this have made sense, Surratt's death would have been way more meaningful. Here, it's just painfully obvious that they wanted an excuse to kill my pet robot dragon, and they did it in the most frustrating way possible. The only saving grace is that I get to beat the fuck out of this asshole again, and this time when I get to the end, a much more reasonable cutscene plays. After hitting him really hard, the Slayer rips the heart of Argent out of Azric's body, reverting him to his true self, and on board his ship, some weird stuff starts happening with Thera, and the whole thing explodes. Azric disappears, like vanishes into thin air in the half a second he's out of the Slayer's line of sight, and then Thera descends from the heavens with the Slayer hands the heart of Argent to Novik, who then walks over to Thera with it and puts it back in her, and now she's back to normal. Is the soul of the Wraith Thera's soul, or does she have her own and it's like two souls in one body? If the soul of the Wraith was in the heart of Argent, why didn't like the body of the Wraith in Thera die? Is this thing here the soul, or you know what? How does it all work? Walking over to his fallen friend, the Slayer pays his respects to Surratt, mourning the loss of the only other character in this game that made sense, and the cutscene ends with him leaving to go find Azric and finish all this for good. The time has come. Azric is wounded and his demonic forces are dwindling without guidance from their leader, and the Argentians are preparing a counterattack on Hell itself. An invasion force of, like what, 20 guys? Has the entire Argentian race been wiped out? You're all about to go kill Satan and you bring a housewarming party's worth of people. Look, there's even more regular Argentian citizens here. That one lady doesn't even have a gun. Oh my god. Well, at least the Slayer's here, and when Thera sees him, she cuts open a rock to open a portal to Hell, and everybody starts moving in. You know, I just realized something. Forget everything about how the stuff with the Wraith soul inside of Thera is never explained, and it doesn't make any sense. The real question we should be asking is why she has a Wraith soul inside of her in the first place. And to answer that question, first we have to ask another one. Who did this guy Who did you or what did you dude? Are all those things female? Why don't we ever see any artwork or like anything else about the queen, and why and how did she die? I bet you she died with all the rest of the Wraiths because she was one, dude. Is the soul within Thera like a part of her or something? Did you get busy with an alien squid spider demon god, dude? My lord. Alright, here we are at the final level of the game. Thera and her group are gonna keep the Horde occupied while the Slayer goes to find Azric, rip him to pieces, and everyone lives happily ever after. Now, before we even get into the level itself, the Slayer finds a codex entry right at the start for Marok, aka Valen's son, that explains nothing. Not only does it not say nearly enough to make him interesting or meaningful in any way, the codex entry literally says nothing. All it says is that Marok doesn't like the Slayer. That's it. Now, I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but if you haven't played Doom Eternal, Commander Valen is actually in that game. Again, I don't have time to go deep into the backstory for Valen right now, and neither does the game because it wasted all the opportunity it had before to do that, but basically his whole character in Eternal is that he actually made a deal with Hell to bring back his son who died in combat and had his soul taken, and so he lived out the rest of his endless days in exile. Not a bad little backstory at all for his brief appearance in Eternal. It worked well enough there, and it would have been great to expand on it here in this game a little more, but that didn't happen. He's literally just here. Remember Commander Valen, guys? Remember his son? Here they are. No, you're not getting anything extra about the circumstances that led up to what we see in Eternal. No, you're not getting any meaning at all to Valen's redemption in Ancient Gods. They're just background characters. That's it. Anyway, we're back in Hell again. No new colors or variations here, just plain old orange Hell, so nothing new to say about the environment, no new enemies, no new guns. Nothing. The only thing really remarkable about this level is just how unremarkable it is. There's not really anything to make it stand out as a final level at all. Few puzzles, few secrets, bunch of demons, and a big arena fight at the end. Business as usual. For what it's worth, the arena fight is definitely formidable. Empowered arachnotrons, a leader cyber demon, and even a champ... What are you doing? What? My cat just jumped up. Yeah, the demons throw everything they have at the Slayer, but it's nothing we haven't seen before. A few chain shots, some rockets, and a couple BFG blasts later, the deed is done, and now it's time for the real final battle. However, as the Slayer approaches Azric's citadel, he catches sight of a Hell Carrier trying to escape, and he gives chase, hopping aboard and climbing onto the deck of Azric's getaway ship. After one more quick berserker battle, the Slayer arrives at the command room, kicks down the door, and now it's really on. Hey look, the witch is still here, and Azric encourages her by saying that he can still bring back the old one for her if they manage to kill the Slayer. Listen lady, I think you need to get over him. There's plenty of elder gods in the sea. Alrighty, here we go. The real 100% final battle. Nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, no second phases, no cutscenes. It is a walloping. The witch and Azric stand no chance against the Slayer here. The witch just has some basic projectile attacks and she can make one of them invincible at a time, but it really makes no difference since she could just attack whoever's not invincible. There's really not much for me to talk about. I mean, Azric has most of the same moves as before, the witch is basically a smaller, harder to hit acolyte, and neither of them are really anything too special. It seems to me that these two aren't meant to be the most difficult final bosses, and instead it's just supposed to be a good old gratifying ass-beating session, and I'm okay with that. The witch goes down first, and Azric follows soon after, but as the Slayer approaches Azric to finish him off, the witch tries to blindside him again, but hey, he used his shield. Nice job, buddy, you learned. Yeah, we could call that a character arc. Great job. Oh, I'm so proud of him. The witch gets blasted back with her own Harry Potter powers and gets tangled in some wiring or something, and then the Slayer bisects her with his shield. Ugh. She then, dies? I don't know, it looks like she just explodes, and you never really know in these types of settings, so let's keep it moving. We then cut to what's happening on the ground, where Thera is busy battling some demons, and we see the Hellcarrier crash land. Azric gets trapped under some debris, so he screams for his Hell Priest buddy Belias and his entourage to come and help him, but I guess demons don't make for very loyal friends, so Belias walks off to go find another guy to be Satan. The only person willing to help Azric out is the Slayer, who gently removes him from the debris, starting with his head. He then tosses it down onto the battleground below. The Horde retreats, knowing that their leader has fallen, and the game comes to an end. So that's that, guys. That was Doom the Dark Ages, and even though its latter half really started to drop a bit in terms of gameplay, storytelling, and quality overall, I still had a pretty delightful time playing it, had a fun time making this video, and I hope you at least enjoyed watching it. Yeah, the plot was way too busy, and the cutscenes were annoying and contrived. Yeah, the world may have had some issues with originality, and yeah, id Software are still fucking assholes for mistreating Mick Gordon, and there's a non-zero chance I'll make a follow-up video so I can go more in depth with that and the rest of my issues with this game, since I don't think I really conveyed my feelings on all of it entirely properly, and frankly I feel conflicted now after having even made this video for fear of indirectly supporting a corrupt company. But I am gonna miss my robot dragon.